Everybody, it's 6:30 on the dot. Tonight is Tuesday, June 19th, 2018. It's a regularly scheduled meeting of the Marquette Township Board. If you would stand and join us in the pledge, we'd appreciate it.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Randy, roll call, please.
Trustee LaRue,
Here.
Trustee Wiegand,
Here.
Trustee Everson,
Here.
Trustee Marks,
Present.
Clerk Rattari is here, Treasurer Johnson,
Here.
and Supervisor Durant.
Here.
Staff present is Manager Gerard, our legal counsel Roger Zappa. Committee members here are Mike Springer from Planning, Recreation, and Roads, and I think, and Rob Cochran's here from the Fire Department. And that's it.
That's good. Got everybody. Thanks. Public comment. If anybody'd like to address the board before we start our meeting, you're welcome to come up to the podium. Name and address, please, for the record.
My name is Peter Thornton at 2412 Huron Street. I've been here before in regards to this power plant. You know, I'm sure the Board of Light and Power has done every effort to create a power company that will meet all our needs. But the fact of the matter is, they made a lot of promises that they can't keep. In the paper here the other day, they said they got a possible fix. This has been going on for over a year. They've been on our property for four different times, taking readings. We understand now that there's a report from the township that we can't see. We asked for the readings that have been taking place in the past, the decibels or whatever, yet nothing. We're in the middle of no man's land. We can't live in our house right now, hardly. We can't wait to get out of here. We got a little place in Grand Marais. We can't wait to get out of here. And nobody does nothing. Nothing. I got my whole damn life in a place that I can't even live in. So where do we go? What do we do? You tell me. I asked the Board of Light and Power, I said, what am I supposed to do? Well, I can't live in my house hardly. Well, I can't tell you what to do. Now one of them said they're sorry. Now one of them said, well, we'll make restitution to you. You think they'd have the common courtesy, maybe give us some free power? Nothing. We're in the middle of nowhere. Well, where do we go? I'm asking for help. Do we have to make a class action lawsuit to get after these people? I had a guy stop for me twice now, asking or was telling me they hear it over on Norwood Street. They hear it down on Granite Street. This is going to spill over to be a major concern for all of us. I'm asking for some help here. Where do we go? I can't live in my house. It runs from 7 o'clock in the morning to 10 o'clock at night. All we hear is a thumping and a whining. And I'm not so sure it's coming through the air. I think most of it's coming through the ground. There's more vibration than it is noise. Well, where do we go?
This is your time to comment, Mr. Frampton. We can comment, and I can give you some responses when everybody's finished, okay? We don't do a back and forth at these meetings, but I'm happy to answer you when everybody's finished.
Well,
Okay. You're allowed to say whatever you want.
This is getting tiresome. Like I said, we got to get out of our house. And nobody makes restitutions. Nothing. They're accountable to nobody. They're doing what they want. With promises, promises, and promises. Well, we're working on it. We're working on it. We're working on it. This has been over a year. And nothing. hopefully this fix is gonna do something, but even they don't sound very positive about it. You got, Turville said, well, it just affects a few. Well, the hell's of a kind of a statement is that? Shouldn't affect anybody. You know, where do we go? What do we do? I've been here about 5 times, bringing the same subject up. Nobody tells us anything. Nothing. Do we have to take a class action lawsuit against these people? I'm beginning to think that's the answer. Where do you go? Then we can take a class action. I had a real estate agent at my house an hour ago. He said it'd have a definite effect on selling your home. I can't even sell a damn place. That was an hour ago. All of us are retired. Where do we go?
Thank you. Anybody else wish to comment? Address the board?
My name is Tom Zorza. I live 2442 Huron, 2 doors away from Scott. And he's correct. It's rough up there. We're right off of Wright Street. We get all the noise up on the hill. I don't know how bad it is down below the hill, but we're bad up there. We haven't had any communications at all from BLP other than them coming up and taking some readings. And they were nice about it. Talked to my wife, I wasn't there, but other than that, you think they would, you know, give us a letter in the mail or something saying, you know, we're working on this, or we got to read everything off the paper, and half of the time it's hearsay. So I'm just here to let you know that we have a problem up there. That monster down there is not going to go away. And what are we going to do? Same what Scott said. What are we going to do? So that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else? Doesn't have to be on this issue, it can be something else. Okay, would you mind waiting just for a little bit? I'm going to give you a privileged comment after public comment. I thought I had it on the agenda, I'm sorry I don't.
That's fine.
But
Just point at me.
I will, yep. We're going to amend the agenda to put you on there.
Hello, Ron Ingram, 2525 Center Street. I came in last year just after I had received a letter in the mail saying I need to remove my chickens from the property, and I did so. And then I came in and asked if the board could revisit their ruling on us being able to have chickens. And my question was, have we visited that? And if so, I'm sure you have my name, number, and address on file, and why didn't I hear anything about it? So that was my question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Anything else you want to talk about? Okay, that closes public comment. Board member comment in response to public comment is next. I can try to address some of this, and I will point to the manager and the attorney just to corroborate some of what we know. Marquette Township has no involvement at all in the BLP. It has nothing to do with us. We're customers just like you are. They are city either owned or mandated. They're their own authority of sorts. They work in conjunction with the city, but they have their own board. They do their own stuff. You're right. They do what they want. That's what they do. Their board decides. It's been suggested by a few people that a class action suit is going to have to be what happens. We're happy to be the intermediary to help voice your concerns or to get information and try to pass it on to you, because this is part of our health, safety, and welfare that we're responsible for. But we have no authority. We have nothing, we can't we're like, it'd be like if I went up and told Ishpeming they needed to go do something. There's nothing we can do other than try to be that conduit for you to help, get information back and forth. But if Roger or Randy, if you want to add something as far as direction, I can't tell you what to do either. That's up to you.
Not so much direction, but we're in the same boat you are. We've asked repeatedly for information. The board members have asked repeatedly for information, and everything that we've gotten back has been public. Came to the board. It doesn't necessarily track what you see in the paper. I was a little bit surprised that the last article that was in the paper was talking only about some noise attenuating items being hung from the ceiling possibly, and nothing about vibration, which has been a concern that the board has had from day one. But Supervisor Durant is accurate. The township itself doesn't have standing to sue. We haven't been damaged. The township itself hasn't been damaged. The residents have, but the township itself hasn't. And we'll leave any further discussion on that mode to Roger from the standpoint of anything along those lines. But we have repeatedly asked and repeatedly gotten the same answers. We're working on it, we're working on it, we're working on it. The folks are in Italy now trying out a prototype. We'll tell you, we'll let you know when we hear something, and we haven't. When was the last communication we got? Almost a month ago.
Well, and they did come to the board and speak, but
Came to the board and spoke, but the last three messages we've got is, don't have anything yet, we'll let you know, don't have anything yet, we'll let you know, and Wurzel is working on it, but hasn't resolved anything, and that's basically what we have. Well, well, there were two issues that this board raised. Number one was the noise issue, and the other was the vibration issue. So it appears that they're only addressing the noise issue with the decibel readings, because there are certain levels of decibels at certain distances and things such as that they're trying to address. But that's not the whole issue. That's not the whole answer. It's not what you folks are feeling. You're right. We are now, we have supplied to the BLP every one of the complaints that we've received, multiples from some, obviously, and those have all been submitted to Mr. Carpenter. So they have copies of all of those. They know what your complaints have been. They know what the issues have been. We are, you're right, it is expanding. We do have at least one resident from Granite that's now raising an issue. In a couple of other areas around. It's not just those of you on the Hill. So I guess from there, I think what Supervisor Durant was pointing to is that the BLP, although it's a creature of the city's charter, is not controlled by the city. It's a separate, independent governmental entity similar to the Road Commission. The Road Commission exists under the auspices of Marquette County, the Marquette County Board, but the county board doesn't control them. They're a separate governmental entity. And that's the situation we have with the BLP.
Can I say something? Doesn't the board here have the responsibility to notify the regulatory commission, the EPA, or somebody, or even Sarah Kempenzi? These guys are doing whatever they want and accountable to nobody.
Dave, go ahead.
I guess, I have a number of opinions about this, and they're strictly my opinions. And it seems to me that you could see this coming a year ago. It's strictly being pushed down the road, and trust me, we're working on a solution. I have absolutely no faith that the Board of Light and Power is going to come up with a solution for this. But what they've successfully done, and I would refer back to the last time the Board of Light and Power was here with a meeting, and they were asked specifically, why can't you stall the startup of this until you've got a solution? And his only comment about why you couldn't do that is we didn't want to buy any more coal, which is absolutely ridiculous. This is typical Board of Light and Power pushing it down the road until it's too late. Now they've shut down the Shiras plant. The next thing they're going to do is start to mothball the Shiras plant, and there won't be any options after that. You're just going to be stuck with it. And I think it's more than time for some legal action to take place, because that's the only thing that's going to get anybody's attention. If you keep sending them strongly worded letters, you're going to get the same thing that you've gotten over the last year and a half. You're going to get just we're working on it and trust us. And I think the working on it and trust it has long since passed its usefulness. I think it's a shame that what they're doing to the residents, and just with no regard. I think the engineering that was done on that is disgraceful, to call that engineering and to come up with the problems that they've come up with since this thing started up. And they haven't even addressed the vibration problem. And they tell you they're looking at it. We talked to them about it at the meeting here when they came and presented their information. But looking at the paper, they're not addressing vibration. That's a whole separate issue. And I think it smacks of just a terrible job of engineering right from the start. They didn't look at the ground they were putting it on. They didn't look at where that vibration was going to go. It's disgraceful. And I think the city can push it down the road as far as they want and say the Board of Light and Power we have no control over them. That's the same as the county saying we have no control over the road commission. Eventually they do. And they carry a lot of weight if they start complaining, but they're not going to complain because it's not in their best interest to complain. And I think the only way you're going to get any action on this is if something legal starts. And I think it needs to start sooner rather than later.
John?
From the beginning, the board, in letters that were presented to the Power and Light, questioned whether there would be pollution of any kind at all emitting from their new planned unit. They answered denying that there would ever be any pollution from there. It was beyond the engineering that they had accomplished and felt that it was not going to allow anything like that to happen. That hasn't been the case, but I think that by itself will be really good evidence for someone to start with should there be any litigation. Because if this body could question the placement of that facility without questioning pollution that would come to people who resided on a bluff, then I think that would be really enticing evidence presented to whoever's going to consider it, whether it be the Attorney General of the state of Michigan or maybe the Public Service Commission of the state of Michigan. But what we have done that we can point to with pride is, from the beginning, we created a system of creating a repository of all complaints, all names of people involved, giving them a form to fill out to indicate what it was that they were complaining about. And we have a reservoir of information provided by the Power and Light and information that we have talked about here. Every bit of that, if we have license to pass it on, is available, and I think it's a very valuable reservoir for anyone that wants to take this further to use. We would make it available overnight. We've done what we can to do it within the scope of our involvement and the fact that we clearly know that we don't have standing. But you sure do have standing. And there's a list of people who I would think would join you in that standing.
was a couple other ones on the block that I'm aware of. I'm understanding there's 15 or so complaints. I don't know.
Well,
We have,
Yeah, they're in the office. That's part of public record. Come into the office and talk to Randy or the staff.
yeah, we've provided all of those, including the new ones that came in. Well, the one just came in yesterday, I emailed to Mr. Carpenter, so he has that as well. And it pretty well documented.
It's very good documentation. Yeah, that's very good.
But there are, I think there are 17 different locations, and a couple more that have not come in yet that probably will.
Would we sue just the BLP, not the city of Marquette?
You can answer that, Roger.
Okay. I have to preface this with, my role is to provide legal advice to the township, so I can't give you legal advice per se. However, what you've heard so far this evening is in terms of are there public remedies that the township has, those are very limited. And one of the things that didn't even come up so far is keep in mind that the problem itself isn't even located within the physical boundaries of Marquette Township. That doesn't absolutely rule out a township remedy, but it's one more complicating factor. The symptom is certainly evidencing itself within Marquette Township, but the problem itself that's being generated is outside its physical boundaries. So it is correct that a person or an entity to pursue legal action must have, standing is a loose term for it, there are other terms as well, but some form of personal horse in the race or a stake at issue. The property owners would clearly have that because you're the ones who are experiencing the noise and the vibration on an ongoing day-to-day basis, as would all of the other people. There are a number of private remedies, if you will, and one of them would potentially involve suing the Board of Light and Power. There are different legal theories, some of which, in my personal opinion, would be more successful than others. There's something, for example, called inverse condemnation. Fancy legal term for, well, a governmental entity can generally condemn property if they need it for a public purpose. For example, if a new road is needed in a given area, a governmental entity can actually file an action and condemn that property, but then they have to pay the fair market value of that property that's condemned. And there was a constitutional amendment, you might recall, several years ago, where if it involves a residence, it's not just the fair market value of the residence, it's 125% of the value of that residence. And that all gets very complicated, and we could be here till 11 o'clock discussing this on some of the nuances. But there are private potential remedies that individuals who are experiencing the problem would have standing to raise and address. And of course, from just a cost effectiveness standpoint, it makes more sense to have one action. It's not technically a class action per se, but it would be a joint action among anyone who wishes to join it. And naturally, there's strength in numbers, as well as economical factors of joining together, of doing it once rather than 17 times. So, Light and Power are doing what they want. They're telling us one thing, you just gotta, you say, kicking it down the road, and they're accountable to nobody. Shouldn't they be accountable to somebody?
Should be accountable to their customers.
Just before I forget, I only answered half of the question. On the inverse condemnation is something different than condemnation. If a governmental entity just decides that they want to build their project, and we don't need, let's take an airport expansion. This is a common condemnation thing, where you really ideally need 500 acres, but we're going to try to do it with 400 acres because we don't want to pay for the extra. So then the people on the bounds who are suffering from the noise and the air pollution and the other effects of the airport are suffering it, but haven't had their property actually condemned or their houses torn down, because condemnation typically involves acquiring your property. The theory of inverse condemnation is that the governmental unit has essentially devalued your property without going through the formal measure of condemning it. That's why it's kind of important to have some type of an indication of what the damage is. And the remedy is compensation in that type of a claim, as opposed to shutting down the source of the problem. So there's equitable relief and there's legal relief. Equitable relief is getting an injunction to shut things down. The likelihood of that succeeding with a project like this, I would frankly say, is not terribly great. There are, as I say, however, some of the other remedies have some potential merit. I'm not giving you legal advice, telling you what you should do. I can't do that for you. But there are some avenues that might be worth your exploring. Because what inverse condemnation is a cause of action claiming that the governmental entity has, moving forward, devalued your property by taking this action A, B, and C, and it has caused me damage in this amount because now I can't sell my house except unless I take a $50,000 discount or whatever the case may be. I'm just throwing that out as an example. That's the nature of just one of the potential claims that might be worth if a remedy isn't received. Sue, now I can't say what I am or am not privy to in terms of potential discussions. Something could be coming. I can't promise that for you. But if it is not, there are other potential private remedies that may be worth exploring. That is not, however, something that, because of the township's proximity, that they really have an effective legal means of enforcing for you on your behalf, if that makes any sense.
Roger, do we have anybody that might be, not we, but I mean the area, have anybody legally? Just, you don't have to name names, but are there attorneys and firms in town that could help
Certainly.
them? Okay. So there's people out there you could Google, maybe class action attorney, whatever.
Well, the BLP has been the subject of lawsuits in the past, and they have not prevailed in those lawsuits in the past, and we were one of them years ago, the townships, over a rate issue. But getting back to Mr. Thornton's question, yeah, I have the applications. Those are basically a survey. It's open to the public. It's available to the public. We just asked individuals that were having an issue to let us know that they were having an issue. So that's not a confidential submittal. That's, I have a file.
If we were to seek legal counsel, would we have access to the data that they have obtained, that we've not heard? I mean, we've given the privilege then to them to come up and take readings on our property, but not seen any data or any results of that.
We haven't seen any data either. We saw one very cryptic report that really didn't say much of anything. It wasn't any specific data. It was a one-page summary from their consultant, basically indicating that they thought they had a solution that they were going to pursue.
Pete, I think you had your hand up.
Yes.
I've talked to Mr. Thorson several times on this, and Dave is right, because I question why they cut the trees down and put a solar panel up in front where you should leave the big trees there to help the sound barrier. But, once they get going, they don't stop. They just push it down our throats. I know several people up there, the Petersons, Thorsons, the Zorzas, and the Lorries, and that, they're all retired. They're up there They bought the house up there, a very comfortable, nice setting, and now they have to deal with this. Now, Mr. Thorson said, he told me before, he said his quality of life is being suffered. His property value, he's talked to lending agencies and salespeople. They said, you're not going to, with the noise and that, you might not get the potential that you deserve in that property there. So it is making a big effect. Where do you go from there, you know? It's just not fair to them. You know, do they have to file, you know, reduce their taxes for nothing or something like that? And then it affects us. So it really bothers me that we can't do more. They go down to the office, some of them have been down to the office, ask questions, and basically they sort of get the bum's rush. You know, yeah, okay, we're doing it, you know, goodbye, get the hell out of here, you know. Basically, that's what they're saying. They come up here and they can't get some of the answers. Mr. Thorson would like to see something from the township, sort of updating what's going on. But some of the information that Randy has, he can't just publish it out. So we have to find some way of doing that. And maybe, I don't know yet, that's something. But it bothers me that they're not 21 years old anymore, you know. Mr. Thorson might be 55, but, but you know, later in life, we want to relax. We want to sit out on your porch and just enjoy the other thing. And they can't do that. So there has to be some way that we can help them and get something done, because it's a damn shame that what's happening.
Go ahead, Randy.
Yeah, about 3 to 4 years ago, when they came, and it's still on the video, it's a resource for you guys, whoever's up in that area. We had an hour work session with with the Board of Light and Power, and they stood up at the podium, and they told us that we had concerns about all these things that are happening now, and they told us it wasn't going to happen. And we have it, and it's a resource for you folks. And that might be a good place to start.
YouTube, hey?
Yeah, it's a YouTube, and it just look for Marquette Township, and it's all broken down by date. And again, the township too is a resource for you folks. Anything that we can give you, we will. So don't feel like we can't hold anything back, because we're you know, a public entity, and you have every right to have what we have, as long as it's not confidential by the rules of the state. So
Same thing with BLP.
yeah.
Yeah, you can do a FOIA if you have to. Randy?
Ernie had his hand up first, I'll
I'm
wait for
sorry,
him.
you should have tapped me.
Couple items, listening to it. Going back, we're talking about anything legal against the Board of Light and Power. I think the step is also against the actual manufacturer of that, because they're the ones that came to the meeting here and provided us with all the data as to the sound, where it's going to be. It's only going to be all local. It's only going to go out X number of feet from the plant and that. So they were, either they did not understand, or they did not know, or they didn't do the work they were supposed to do and that. Because that's all in paper form that was provided to the board, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, that we have it on file.
Close
And
to
it's
three.
all diagrammed at that point in time as to where that sound is supposed to go in that. So they are also have to be held accountable for what they said in that. Strictly at this meeting, and strictly in the data that they presented in that, through the BL that. So that's there. Now, the other thing that Trustee LaRue mentioned, and we're talking about the individuals in their houses, when the minute I hear property value being degraded or being affected, that's a direct effect to the township and that, at that point in time. Because all of a sudden, our income or our effective revenue is going to be downgraded. How much? Who knows? But if it does go down with many different homes up there, and as we get more people, we do have something that we can now hang our hat on, that the valuation in that area is going down strictly because of what they're doing. Now, legally, I don't know what it is, or if we can hang our hat on that, but it's something I think we need to research, because it's going to be directly affecting us in that way and that.
Good point. Randy?
I don't mean this to sound the way it's gonna sound, but this is just a practice. When the Gandhi Township fires up the 7 that they have, just wait for Lake Enchantment and the folks in that area to come and visit us.
We're not done.
Oregon Meadows, Lake Enchantment, that whole area is lit not more than a mile from the site of where the 7 are.
They are responsible for what they said, and the gentleman who came last time from BLP and said, John said, get those people in here that made these decisions and made these promises, and he said, well, none of them work here anymore. Well, that's not your problem. That still falls to the BLP. They're responsible, and like Ernie said, Wurtzler is too. It was put together poorly. We saw that from the beginning. They did it, they got these on sale, and they had to get them out, and they did, their due diligence was pathetic. There wasn't any. They just did it.
You know, and the other piece of the equation is the folks that were in office at the time aren't there anymore.
Double duel. Dave?
Just to jump away from this for just a minute to the gentleman with the chicken question.
Well, that's next, though. But if you
Different noise.
want, you can.
That would best be brought up at the Planning Commission, and next meeting's on the 27th of this month at 7 o'clock.
Next Wednesday night.
Right back here. That is on the radar, and they are looking at it, but you'd be better off to bring that presentation to the Planning Commission.
That's what I was going to tell you. Yes.
The one thing I don't like is that Mr. Thorson made a comment about he's losing trust in everything. By leaving them out in the cold, so to speak, from the county, from the light and power, and then we're limited to what we can do, they're just losing faith in the government. They're losing faith in the township because we can't help them, we can't give them answers. They're losing from the light and power because they're not getting the answers. And it just, we live in a great township. We try to do as best we can, but something like this is just ruining it. And how we go about it, Randy and Roger, and you think about something, but we can't just leave them out there without trying to help them in some way.
Well, that's why I said we can be a resource, however
Yeah.
whatever that ends up evolving to. That's not a problem. We can provide information, or this forum, this is on YouTube, so the public can hear it. And normally we don't let public comment go this long, board member, but this is important. So I want you to be able to get the information you need. So, that's why we're talking about it.
One last thing, my understanding is then the township would not foresee or take action until it started to affect how much you could collect on.
If that's possible, that's a Roger question.
Yeah, and I don't think that's what's being said. I think what's being said is about the only thing that we have any real authority to do, and Trustee Marks has brought it up a couple of times, is a letter campaign basically to either the Regulatory Commission or the governor or whatever, from that standpoint. But whatever happens with taxes is irrelevant. We don't have any control over that. In fact, there's a Senate bill pending right now that will take the assets of utility companies off the tax roll, the personal property aspects of it. So the Senate's currently considering that bill. I think it's Senate Bill 1025, I think is the number.
31.
But that 1031. But
Johnson stated that
well, he's coming from the standpoint of the treasurer. So anything that impacts taxes is an issue, but that doesn't really damage the township. It's no different than the dark stores issue. That reduced our taxes, but we don't have any legal action on that because it was another agency that allowed that to occur. There's another agency allowing this to occur, the regulatory agency. So from our standpoint, that's basically our avenue is to raise the issue on behalf of the residents, with the Regulatory Commission, but that's a letter type
Yeah,
of thing.
letter.
We really don't have any authority to compel them to do anything.
that's your only leverage.
It's pretty much with these folks, that's our only leverage. And as I alluded to earlier, the only other aspect in this township, as well as several other townships, did file suit against the BLP on a rate issue that went all the way to the Supreme Court and was ruled in the favor of the townships. That was, 20 years ago, I think, or more, 30 years ago. But again, that was similar to a class action. The communities banded together and said, you're having an adverse impact on our rate structure. We're not being treated fairly. And like I said, it went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the municipalities. Oh, depends on what the issue is.
I want to question here. Meantime, if you take this to a class action suit or whatever, they could drag this out for months.
Could.
They could also settle with you too,
Yeah.
between them and Wurzela. Buy your house or buy the bluff or,
What are we supposed to do in the meantime?
We've been suffering a year
there is no meantime. You need to do something if you want a solution, in my mind. If you want something done, you can't wait for somebody to come and help you. You're gonna have to do it. You've got to take some kind of action. You got to call them up, go to their board meetings, raise a fuss, write a letter, get a campaign, get all 17 of you. You have to do something. Nobody's going to come and take care of you. You're going to have to.
Yeah.
But I'm saying.
I'm just saying, when I talk to Tom Carpenter, he says, well, I can't tell you what to do.
He's not going to just say, hey, let me give you 200,000, You're going to have to take the initiative. Yeah, I know.
I shouldn't have
I understand.
to get out of my house because it's borderline power.
Yeah, that's not that's our problem. It's not your
Yeah.
Publicity, negative publicity, I'm sure they do not want that.
I'm not sure what Lisa's going to write. We'll see tomorrow.
Well, the issue is public opinion. Public opinion on a public utility. Hard to say what their response may be.
It's sad. It's very sad. But is there any suggestions that we can,
I think we've
Help
given
them.
them quite a few
okay,
suggestions without getting too.
Well, as a governmental entity, we really can't give advice.
I know,
but
but just-
But I think there have been some suggestions that have been bantered about that might be
Yeah.
worth following up on.
If you forget, watch the YouTube again tonight or tomorrow. Okay, can we move on? And you got your question answered, so you could be good.
One question you've got, Randy, would you make a list for us?
Sure, I can make copies of them.
Okay, and if you would, maybe I'll pick them up tomorrow or whatever.
It might not be tomorrow, but depends on how late we go tonight. But,
Yeah, we're gonna be
but I know how to get a hold of you. I'll run copies.
Okay, give me a call.
Yep.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. Any other board member comment in relation to public comment? We're good? Okay, thanks. Now we're up to the consent agenda. All right, tonight's consent agenda consists of approval of the Township Board work session minutes of May 30th, regular meeting minutes of June 5th, and Township Board work session minutes of June 7th. Bills payable in the amount of $251,778.39. We have a budget amendment tonight, 2018-06, so we will do a roll call vote on this. And Randy can give us the highlights. Received committee reports and other reports from the Planning Committee, it says. Planning Commission approved minutes of May 23rd. Road Committee approved minutes of May 1st and draft minutes of June 5th. Recreation Committee approved minutes of April 17th and draft minutes of May 15th. 18. Water Production Sales Report of May. Fire Chief, Fire Marshal's Activity Report of May. Sheriff's Activity Report of May. Fire Department draft minutes of business meeting of June 11th and officers meeting of the same night. Peter White Public Library Advisory Council minutes of March 7th. And I had no supervisor's report. Financials tonight and treasurer's report from May and April. Correspondence not requiring board action. Notice of hearing for Semco Energy Case U-0237. Correspondence regarding 2018 contribution in support of MTA PAC. Resolution House Bill 6049 and Senate Bill 1025 for the assessing. And conflicts of interest, I don't believe we have any noted tonight. So, Dave, excuse me one second. Dave, did you want to pull an item out
In
then?
consideration of how long everything's taken so far tonight, No, I won't pull that out.
Next time. If you want to add it to the agenda, just let me know next time.
Yeah, we'll do that.
However you want to talk about it. Okay, then we will need, you want to,
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Support.
okay. Roll call.
Before the roll call, I'll give you the highlights of that budget amendment. It's primarily for the fire department. It's 2018-06. And authorization is requested to increase revenues and expenditures in the fire fund. The revenue will be increased by the FEMA grant proceeds and estimated ambulance receipts. Offsetting will be the purchase of the radios and ancillary equipment, as well as the ambulance cost, etc. The offset will be added to the fund balance. So we got more money in and we're spending more. So that's basically what that is. And roll call vote is Trustee Marks.
Yes.
Clerk Rattari is yes. Trustee LaRue.
Yes.
Trustee Wiegand.
Yes.
Trustee Everson.
Yes.
Treasurer Johnson.
Yes.
Supervisor Durant.
Yes,
Motion carries.
thank you. Now for the rest of the agenda, I'd like to make another addition to, or not another, but number 6 is Board Education Privilege Comment. I'd like to add voters, not politicians, would like to address us, and then that would move staff reports to B, so the voters would be A, if anybody has no problem with that.
I'll approve the regular agenda as amended.
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Okay, now, madam.
Again, I have some business.
Could you give us your name and address, please, at the microphone?
My name is Madeline Koval. I live at 149 Rock Street in Marquette. And I am the Regional Director for Voters Not Politicians for the entire UP. The Voters Not Politicians campaign was started by a Facebook post in November of 2016. Our president, Kathy Fay, wanted to figure out a way to bring people together to find solutions and give voters a voice. From there, Voters Not Politicians held 33 town halls in 33 days, and the very first one was in Marquette. We tried to educate Michiganders about gerrymandering and potential solutions. We gathered feedback to build our solution. And from this grassroots movement of more than 5,000 people, we came together across the state. We worked to collect 425,000 signatures from Michigan's 83 counties, and we did it in 110 days. We turned in our ballot petitions on December 20th. Tomorrow, the Board of Canvassers has called a meeting, and we are the only item on the agenda. We have our fingers crossed that we are actually going to get on the ballot now. You may have seen us gathering petitions or showing petitions, and what I'm hoping is that you signed them. And you may have seen the article in last week's Mining Journal that the Michigan Court of Appeals had ordered our measure to be placed on the November ballot. Our opponents, Citizens Protecting Michigan's Constitution, has said they will appeal. They want to appeal the proposal because they, and I quote, "it is an anti-democratic scheme that would completely silence the people's elected representatives and replace them with an unaccountable commission whose membership is based strictly on partisan preference," unquote. This is a very interesting argument because our proposal says exactly the opposite. Right now, politicians draw the lines that determine where you vote. Most of us don't pay attention to that. I didn't. My district was redrawn. My voting place didn't change. I stayed right where I was. However, Ishpeming Township and Powell Township were moved to a different congressional district. And a lot of them didn't find that out until they went to vote. No one explained why the lines were redrawn, because this is done in secret, behind closed doors, and with much influence from mega donors and special interests. When politicians choose their own voters by drawing the district map, it's called gerrymandering. And now this is a word that people didn't pay a lot of attention to until the last few years, but it's gotten a lot of coverage across the country. Gerrymandering has been around since the country has existed, and the name comes from combining Eldridge Gary's name and the salamander-looking district that was drawn in Massachusetts to keep him in power. The newspapers dubbed it gerrymandering. The whole purpose of gerrymandering is to keep the party that is currently in power in power. There is no other reason. The party in power after a census draws the lines for the new districts to make sure that they will win the next election. Redistricting is constitutionally required every 10 years after the census, and federal law requires that each district should have roughly the same number of people and that it adhere to the Voting Rights Act to make sure the minority population is represented. That is all the law requires. And that process is not in the hands of the people. Michigan is divided roughly 50-50 Republican and Democrat, but the state representation is 30-70, Republicans in the majority. When there isn't fair and transparent rules, politicians gerrymander lines any way they want. Voters don't have a voice, and votes don't translate into proper representation. When we held the town halls, we heard from the public and ultimately wrote into our policy a simple idea: bring together a 13-member commission of voters to draw the lines out in the open with public input from across the state. The commission would follow strict criteria to draw the lines in public and create fair and impartial voting districts. We heard the people want a redistricting system that they can trust. The feedback we heard stressed the importance of moving the redistricting process away from those with conflicts of interest and instead having a group of regular folks on an independent citizens redistricting commission. We want representation from each political party. There would be 4 Republicans, 4 Democrats, and 5 non-affiliated with any major party. The criteria would be equal population and the Voting Rights Act. Communities of interest must not favor or disfavor incumbent political or politician or political candidates, and respect existing city, township, and county boundaries. The final district lines would have to be approved by 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats, and 2 independents. This is to ensure that no party would hijack the process. The current process has no public hearings or oversights. It's behind locked doors with secret maps. Our proposal requires public hearings across Michigan during, before, and after. We want to end gerrymandering in Michigan and make the decision fit Michigan: fair, independent, and transparent. And there are 3 things I am asking for tonight. Go to votersnotpoliticians.com, volunteer, donate, and on November 6th, please vote for an independent Citizens Redistricting Commission. Thank you.
Can I get a copy of that sometime, your speech? It's very informative. Any questions for Madeline? If you want to hold it up so Isaac can see it, I don't know which, Isaac, what's a good place so that she can,
You have to come up here in the middle.
This is the new.
you gotta hold it still,
Let
though.
me just be Vanna for a moment.
How about just right there? Just stay right there.
Here is how the new lines got drawn, and it dropped down and picked up Ishmael Township and Powell.
Marquette got goofed up too, Marquette Township.
Marquette Township stayed the same.
Well, we have a different county representation,
You got changed.
so we got,
Yeah.
Split.
yeah.
And nobody tells you anything. And honestly, this is one of the least gerrymandered ones. The little business card size, that's Detroit. And when you look at their maps, they're just ludicrous. And if, I could do a couple of days. If you really want some more information, tomorrow night, 6:30, Messiah Lutheran Church, we are having a town hall. And hopefully it's gonna be a celebration. So,
Thank you.
6 PM, you said, tomorrow?
6:30,
6:30?
Messiah Lutheran on Magnetic Street in Marquette.
Okay, thank you very much for that information. Okay, staff reports, fire department. Rob's the man.
Good evening. Submitted the fire marshal's reports. Are there any questions over that?
Randy, did you want to kind of look at the, you probably want to use these when we talk capital, right?
Actually, that's for your,
Comment.
when you're down towards, further down on the agenda, that was basically background for that
That's what I was
discussion.
thinking. But I didn't know if Rob had any comments on it.
Oh, Rob put it together. I don't know if he wants to make comment. What she's talking about is the equipment summaries that you did.
I can answer any questions you have on it, or I can give you a brief summary over it, whichever you would like.
Well, we know we've been getting a lot of calls, or you've been getting a lot of calls. The
We
siren's
have.
going off.
Matter of fact, Trustee Everson and myself, we all just got back from a fire.
Yeah.
Yep.
But right now, for this month, we already have 44 calls this month, so we're looking at a record month. Last month, we did 42. 34 of them were EMS, that would be 80%, and then we had quite a few different other calls with it. We've been pretty busy. The vehicles, you have that report in front of you. We did have the tires visually inspected. It is a MIOSHA requirement for every 10 years that they have to be broken down and visually inspected, because fire trucks, especially ones like ours, they sit on cold pavement and get flat spots, and then all of a sudden they're called to action. It's not good for the tires. So we,
What was the result then of the
the
test?
results of it is 2178's tires, which are actually older than the ones on 77, are holding up well. The ones on 2177, we need to look at replacing in the next couple of years. The front tires are 12 years old, and the rear tires are 11 years old. And the rear tires are what's showing the most wear.
How much would they cost for a tire?
The quote that we got was approximately 3,800, I believe, off the top of my head, to replace all 6 tires. on it.
38.
38. I'm sorry,
Total?
it's not 6 tires, it's 10 tires.
38 for all of them, not a piece, right? 38.
38 for all the
38
tires.
Okay.
That's to buy the tires.
Okay.
How many is there?
6 on 7, my bad.
There's 8
I
on there.
confused my trucks.
Okay. Yeah, I knew that was the last I heard, was that you were going to have them looked at. I didn't get that answer yet. What else is happening besides, we know the calls.
We've been, like you said, the calls. Mike and I are busy trying to load reports. Assistant Chief Shanahan's been doing a very good job. We've been trying to help him out. I did not write this report on my own. This is a team effort between Assistant Chief Shanahan, Mike, and myself. Everything we do, we work together on to get it done, make sure we give you a quality product.
Any questions for him? Yes, Ernie.
Going through it, I was looking at the call-outs as to when they were called out, and I started looking at it, and I says, wait a minute, from 8 in the morning till 5 in the evening. Total during the 24 period was 42 calls, but 29 of those were within that day shift. And it seemed like the great percentage of running daytimes in that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we have a lot more activity during the daytime, people out and about, and particularly medicals that we've been responding to.
And the only other thing that we've talked about is, if we did at some point decide to do a second shift, that would mostly be to capture some of those nighttime calls. There aren't a lot, but to utilize our ambulance and be able to get those calls. Obviously, we're not going to be as quick responding then as the city would be because they're there full-time, So, but yeah, the bulk of them are during the day. If nothing else, maybe we could shift, and have like, I don't know how we do it with the staff we have, but like 10 to 8 instead of like 8 to 4 or something like that. Shift it a little bit to cover the 5 to 6 o'clock rushes, if there is one.
We can take a look at different options, absolutely.
Anything else? Yeah, Dan.
On paper, it doesn't seem like a lot of calls, but the guys that are getting up in the middle of the night, they might have a different opinion.
Yeah.
I could get a copy, or if you can write down the sizes of those tires for me, too.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Any other questions of the fire marshal?
Not really a question, but one of the other aspects that come from the increase in calls is the sirens are going off more often, and we're starting to get some issues, resident complaints about the siren. There are reasons for the siren. We do have pagers and we do have telephone, but in many of the areas of the township, those are not effective. And as demonstrated by the complaints, the siren is much more effective in terms of having people be dispatched. We're a little bit different situation than our neighbors. The city, for instance, they get dispatched right out of their hall because they're there. I mean, they're staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, so they don't have a siren, and they've got the staff right there on hand. We only have that during the daytime, but in the last 2 weeks, I know of at least 2 occasions where we had back-to-back 3 different dispatches within 5 minutes. One was an ambulance, and the other 2 were, one was the ambulance, one was another response vehicle, and the other was a major rig for a car accident. So, I mean, those things happen, and the only way the other firefighters know that is by hearing the siren going off. So, is it an issue? Yes, it's an issue. Is it getting worse? Yes, it's getting worse because we're getting busier. We're getting more and more calls, and I don't know what the demographic is or what the rationale. Reason of that is I do know traffic has dramatically increased on the US 41 corridor and all the other streets around the township, and people are more active. So anyway, I just add that.
Yep, I've gotten a couple calls this week about the sirens, and so now I think about these folks every time I hear them. I know specifically who they are. Now it's different, and well, I know even from the hotel standpoint, we have guests coming in on calling all hours of the day and night. Is this a tornado? Is this civil defense? They're afraid. They come in the office and they're like, what do we do? What's going on?
And we understand
And I remember telling Chief DeMars that 13 years ago.
Yeah.
Why are we doing this? But it's changed even more now. Pete?
Another problem I noticed on Saturday when I was sitting at the registration table for the car show is that people aren't pulling over.
No,
My
they do
God,
not.
we should have one of those bumpers and just slide them out. Because people, well, I was sitting there in front of Applebee's, I think we were there for 4 or 5 hours, whatever it was. But several times you went by and people weren't moving over. So there's a problem. How do we try to get to the
Look, you're
people
on
and get out of the way?
We do.
Huh?
know
Well,
you
you're
got
dealing-
They said honk the horn. We're laying on the air horn.
Well, but even at that, they don't hear you because we're dealing in that instance the same as we are with speed and with everything else is distracted driving. They've got headphones on, they've got their radios cranked up, they're talking on their cell phones, and they're just not paying attention to what's going on in the corridor. And, you know, I've numerous times seen you sit at a stoplight with a light being red and people run the red light, you know, and you can't get out, you know, so it's what we've always talked about in the corridor. It has a terrible reputation for being dangerous. It's only dangerous because of the people that are using it. They're not paying attention to driving. They're not observing the speed limits. I see it every morning. I go the speed limit on US 41 all the way here, and I'm passed constantly by cars blasting by. Some reading books on the steering wheel, some talking on their phone, all kinds of things. And it's just, it's a personal responsibility to be concentrating on what you're doing driving and to stay out of the way. You don't want to tangle with one of the fire trucks when it's moving because they can't stop.
Or get out of the left lane.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's the other thing, and there was a story on, I think it was on the TV6 website, about an officer in Indiana or Ohio, I can't remember what it was, that was just ticketing people for driving in the left lane because it is illegal. You're holding up traffic, and that needs to occur more.
Well, and that's part of why we had talked to the sheriff about making sure this patrol is going, and I told him, I want you up and down the corridor, I want you through the Trowbridge, go over to Hidden, I was gonna say Hidden Acres, Bishop Woods, and then turn around and come back up the corridor again, and then go in toward the city. You know, they need to be doing this, and I'm seeing their cars, and they're stopping people.
Well, yeah, and the state police have been cracking down on distracted driving, you know, so it is a serious issue, and not just from the standpoint of distracted driving, but from the standpoint of our emergency response. Something is going to occur, and we don't want to be part of that chain.
Is there anything out there, the technology, like the County Road Commission, they change lighting. Is there anything out there that would help? You know, a different pitch or something like that? Is anyone else doing anything? I know it can't be just here that people are not pulling over.
The big
No,
thing
it's
is public
everywhere.
education.
That's what I was-
And
that's
even
where I
when
was heading.
people see us coming, they pull out in front of us. That's why when we do driver training, we teach our drivers to be defensive drivers.
Total defensive.
Because when you come up behind somebody with the lights, they can do everything from do what they're supposed to, put a little right and stop, or slam on the brakes in front of you, or pull on the left side of the road, which really can make things interesting. So we teach them to drive defensively. You know, get there safe, get there alive, don't create another emergency on the way. You're
Well-
no good to anybody if you wreck.
We all know it is a state law to pull over for emergency vehicles, and I did have an incident with the city where somebody did not do that. And I got his license number down, I went to the police department, they issued a ticket. He got a $75 fine for not yielding to the emergency vehicle. End of story. There was no debating it, there was no nothing. If we had the opportunity to do that, and if we could take a picture of their license plate, the passenger and on the passenger side of the vehicle, and then give it to the sheriff's department, they would issue tickets, but
They would.
people do it all the time.
Too bad we don't have a camera in the front of the fire truck. You could do that. You know, you got cameras all over. You know, and it's,
Or have a video when we're responding and be able to get that license plate number and have it right there. There's no arguing. They would just get a fine.
Dash cam.
Next grant.
Yeah.
Go ahead, get a grant for inside dash cam.
Yep.
Yeah.
police department do it all the time.
Yep.
But I guess the response to the concerns about the siren is we can tone it down possibly a bit. I don't know if you can adjust the volume on it or not. It does serve a valid purpose. Is it irritating? It's irritating. I can hear it at my house, when it goes off. I can also hear chocolate when theirs goes off. There's a reason for that. It's intended to be heard. We can go to a different kind of a paging structure, but that's going to increase the cost of the fire department, which will increase the cost of the $2.5 million operating fund.
Well, I think
So
it's something we need to look at anyway.
it is. We can certainly take a look at it. And again, it's only recently become an issue because we've become so active recently with transport. I mean,
It is just daytime hours.
Yep,
It's not at
mainly.
night.
Yeah, for the most part.
Mhm.
Yeah, in my opinion, I just think they should, if it blows, it should just be once, you know.
It does get excessive.
It does just go once unless we have multiple calls.
Yeah, because it was like three calls
Back to
in a
back.
row.
Yeah,
And I heard
5
it 3
minutes.
times, and it's like, I think, because after the first one, people kind of know what's going on. Your fire group kind of knows there's an issue. I know it's paged every call, so.
I believe it's automatic. When the page goes out, it automatically
Dispatch.
alerts the siren.
Well,
And
I guess the other piece people need to realize is we don't control the siren. That's controlled by central dispatch. They're the ones that initiate the siren.
Is there anything we can do on publication and send something out to make it? I don't think it's a lot of our residents that don't do it. It's like you could, in the monthly report, just that we're having a problem with this, or, I don't know. Like Rob said, education, how do we get to them, so.
A lot of this happens on US 41, and a lot of people on US 41 are
They're
not
not,
our
they're-
residents.
yeah, I think our
Transient.
residents take
Yeah.
pretty good caution.
We have a fair number of transient vehicles.
Randy, you said, it was like last year or something, you said something about MDOT or somebody was going to start putting up signs to say not to travel in the left lane. So that would help, too.
Well, that was part of the legislation. Part of the legislation was that there was going to be signage involved with reminding folks, and I have seen some of those signs in other places, reminding you that the left lane is not a travel lane. It's a passing lane only, and if you're holding up traffic, you'll are a problem.
every day I travel that corridor, multiple people are doing it.
Yep.
It drives me nuts.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for Rob? This is good education here, too, just having the conversation and letting the public be able to be aware of what we're dealing with. It isn't always just about numbers, it's about the whole operation. So it's good information. Okay,
Thank you, Rob.
thanks.
Thank you.
Public Works, we don't have Kirk here. That's one of the things that Dave wanted to talk about was the production report, so we'll save that. Unless there's something you want to add. Did Kirk say anything that he had going on, or do you want to share?
No.
Okay, so nothing from him. Assessing, I thought Dulcie was going to give us a printout update.
But
at
she was
least
going
on
to do that as well.
We got the signed resolution in here. We did that last time.
The only thing I can pass along is that I did have a conversation with Dulcie regarding the assessing legislation, and it looks like that is going to be moving forward. Not good.
Yeah.
No, they're pushing it forward, and it looks like it will be going into place. On the bright side, it looks like we may be eligible for a waiver simply because of our operation and the last inspections.
I'm thinking the whole UP should be eligible. Okay. Attorney report. What do we got going, Roger?
Well, it's been a fairly busy month. Since the last report, we met with Semco in terms of the revised route for the gas line through our well field. And that's basically, well, it's one of your
It's on the
agenda items.
agenda, yeah.
Get her on the agenda.
We came up with a resolution that looks acceptable in terms of where the routing is. The library ballot and resolution have been put together in follow-up to the last meeting for the action that has to be taken by the board and the ballot language itself. I responded to an inquiry from the manager regarding camping issues. That's also on your agenda in terms of a possible ordinance for township properties. We also met, the manager and I met with a property owner, a potential prospective developer who had a number of questions regarding what he may or may not be able to do under the zoning ordinance and other statutes in the township. Had some initial communication with the deputy treasurer just a couple days ago. She's in the process of getting me some more information on some delinquent personal property taxes that we'll have to follow up on with collecting. And we fine-tuned the language finally, in the Myers water main easement, they have a perpetual easement because they built the water system, and we are then taking over the portion of the mains as part of our system, as happens in most developments of that nature. That's completed and has now been recorded as of Monday. I also issued a brief opinion regarding some questions the manager had regarding the water contract with the city, and we've also got a number of ongoing zoning issues that been working with the zoning administrator on just keeping those moving forward, both from an enforcement standpoint and from a proactive standpoint.
That sounds pretty good. Sounds like we're your only customer. And I know that's not true. Any questions for Roger that he might be able to answer? Yes, Randy?
Not a question, but a comment. That ballot language will be on the next agenda. So just so you know, it's coming. It'll be a resolution and the language. And we have to get it done by August 14th at 4 p.m.
Okay, that should be good. Okay. Community linkage. Yes, you did stay, okay. I didn't remember you were that far up on the agenda. Discuss fire department equipment maintenance and replacement capital. This has been an ongoing issue with us, especially at budget time, but you know, we keep track of what's going on with the equipment and I say equipment, I'm not meaning their breathing apparatus. I'm talking about the big stuff, the big capital equipment that we know. These are $1 million rigs out there and $6,000 tires and everything else, you know, and trying to keep them up. We've got two that are going to need stuff, you know, in the next few years. The last rear end thing I think was $6,000 you had to replace, so that comes out of your just, you know, checkbook. So the whole purpose of this discussion is to try to figure out, and it doesn't have to happen tonight. I'm not looking for a decision tonight, but we need to have the discussion about how to fund this. We know that, and Randy can get more in depth, but we know that the assessment is the way that the fire department is funded. And that's something that we've put on. It's not a millage, it's an assessment, so that we request 2.5 mils to cover the expenses of the department. And it's up to the fire department to not stay within that number, but tell us what their expenses are, and it needs to be below that. If it isn't, then we need to make it 2.6 or 5.5 or whatever that ends up being. It's a little different than a millage. It's handled differently. The question we've kicked around is, in the past, do we go to a straight millage and just, you know, put it on the ballot and ask the public if they want to fund the fire department with a number, which means we'd have to, this be an ongoing thing. And there's always that fear that at some point the public's going to say no, and then what do we do? Now we have no safety issue, no protection for our people, especially now that we've added the ambulance. So the alternative to that was to keep the assessment in place to do funding of the regular operations and have a millage for capital. Under the laws, the state laws of an assessment, we're not allowed to keep a capital balance, we can't, or a fund balance. We can't have a savings account that we put 10,000 in or 20 or whatever. Like at the end of the year, let's say we did have $10,000 or something. We can't save that and put it in a capital fund and put it toward a new equipment, like as a down payment or something. So we've talked about the idea of having a separate millage, 0.1, 0.5, 1 mil, whatever the number is, doesn't really matter. It would be, let's say, $0.5 mil would generate $40,000 a year from the township. And then that money could be set aside in a capital account and kept, and then next year the same thing. And of course, with our improvements in the SEV of the township, next year might be 50,000. So now we got 90,000. And hopefully that would make a substantial deposit on $1 million piece of equipment. And hopefully we wouldn't have two go at the same time, which would be kind of scary. Plus we bought a used ambulance. You know, I don't know that we're having a lot of issues with it, but that's just one more piece of equipment that falls into this. We've also had extensive discussions in the office, not at this level, but about, you know, forming some kind of a fire authority and teaming up with the rest of the community. So this isn't just, hey, this is a good idea, let's talk about it. We've had some in-depth discussions with all of our options. We've talked to legal numerous times about what we can and can't do as a municipality, especially as a charter township, different because we don't have, you know, full-time staff. So again, the whole discussion needs to be on how we're going to fund big equipment. So Randy, do you want to add anything that I might have missed?
Just so people understand how the system works. Basically, the entire township has been identified as a fire district, period. We provide services to the entire township. So on that basis, the special assessment was established. And basically, the special assessment has been at 2.5 mils, 2.5 mils for, it's almost the 17 years that I've been here, and before that. So it's been probably 20, 25 years at least. At 2.5 mils. Now, the way that works is that's not just an automatic levy of 2.5 mils. What happens is I have to get together with the fire department. We come up with what the budget is. What the whole point of establishing the fire department was to provide a fire department and its operation. So it's basically for the fire department and the operation of the fire department, which is essentially its operating budget. So we calculate what's necessary. Right now we're working on calculating what's necessary for 2019. That comes up to a total number. That number then has to be equated to a millage number. If it's 2.5 mils or less, you levy whatever it takes. And it doesn't have to be 2.5 mils. If you have a situation that comes up, as for instance, we built a new fire hall 4 years ago. So we have a mortgage balance. So what's happening is basically that mortgage, anything that 2.5 mils generates beyond what's necessary to operate the fire department is going towards paying that facility off. That's a necessary expenditure for the operation of the fire department. A failed piece of equipment is not necessarily an operational issue. That's an asset issue. So that's where we come into the situation of not being able to have a fund balance. So without a fund balance, that puts us at the only option we have is either bonding a new piece of equipment or going out for an installment purchase. In other words, going to a local financial institution, taking out a loan, utilizing that piece of equipment as an asset, and then paying interest. What the discussion has been with regard to a potential millage to build a small millage to start building up a fund towards the acquisition or the replacement of a vehicle that fails is to do just that. It's basically to take that one step further to avoid having to pay an interest charge on whatever portion we're able to fund up front, and that in the long term is a savings. What's happening at the same time is we're seeing the cost of these pieces of equipment not just typically increasing, it's geometrically increasing. We've been talking for the last 2 years about what happens if the current aerial, which is a 50-foot ladder truck, what happens if that breaks down? Well, it's been about $1 million to replace that, so we have it insured for $1 million. You'll see in the documentation that you've got that the price for something similar to that now is $1.6 million. So the cost of those kinds of pieces of equipment are escalating at a much more rapid rate, basically, than what our funding capability is. So that's what caused me to come to the board 2 years ago during the budget process and say we have to start talking about a millage. Special assessment is not going to be enough to be able to replace one of the old, the aerials in 1994. So obviously it doesn't have many miles on it, but it has years and it has age on it. And for those kinds of vehicles, historically, there's been a lifespan. There's been a statutory lifespan. I think it was it 20 years?
Originally.
I think it was 20 years originally. Well, that's been lifted over the last 10 years. That was lifted, and as long as it passes an annual inspection, as Rob mentioned, as long as it passes an inspection, it's relicensed again. Well, that can change with the next administration. If they rescind that and go back to that law, then what do? We have a piece of equipment that exceeds what its useful life is according to the statute. So that got us to the point of looking at the potential for a small millage, a fraction of a mil, half a mil, 3/4 of a mil, 0.6 of a mil, whatever, to try and build that up and to ride the growth in the township, which has slowed down somewhat now because we've had some properties taken off the tax roll, potentially more. But at any event, that's the idea. The 2.5 mils for operations right now is sufficient for our operations. That generates about $500,000 a year. We've been running $460,000 to $470,000 of actual expenditures a year. The remaining $20,000 or $30,000 has gone towards the principal on the building. If we have a major catastrophe or a major event or a major expenditure, and as you see, you mentioned the 2177, I think it was, that had the rear end go. That was a $6,000 repair just on that piece of equipment. And we had a pump that went bad. What did the pump run?
That was $12,000.
It was a $12,000 repair on the pump. These are things that have to be done. It's not something that, okay, we'll budget that for next year or whatever. To keep the equipment operating, those repairs have to be made. And that basically eats into the budget. So what we've been talking about and what we've been recommending, staff has been recommending, is that we look, preferably in November, to put a small millage out there for a question for the residents to consider for some time frame, $500,000 for 5 years or 6 years or whatever, to start building that down payment fund for that next vehicle. And that's the whole theory. And you're absolutely right. There are two options to funding a fire operation, but as costs continue to increase, that means a new millage question every year, new millage question every year, new millage question every year. If you have a special assessment, basically what you do is you have a public hearing every year, and the public hearing is 2.5 mils sufficient to meet the budget necessary? If it is, fine. If it's not, then you consider maybe 2.6, 2.3, whatever it takes to cover the operation of the department for that year. This year we have some revenue. We'll have some revenue for 2019 that we have not had in the past. Some of our EMS costs are being offset by some revenue from the ambulance, so that'll be a positive. That'll help keep us within that 2.5 mils.
And you know, I gotta give the fire department crew credit, not even just the full-time staff, but they're meticulous with these vehicles. And they're able to do a lot of these repairs and get the parts, and the companies that they work with are unbelievable as far as coming here and bringing parts and getting on the phone and telling them what to do. And so this isn't because these vehicles are ignored or anything.
No, we do a tremendous amount of the maintenance ourselves, the staff ourselves, but there are certain things that we can't do, like, the rear end replacement. That was a huge, I mean, you don't realize how big these pieces of equipment are until you stand next to them, and, the tire's up to your shoulders, and the rear end is the size of a Volkswagen, that they are trying to pull out and to move. And basically that's what you're dealing with, this large-scale equipment. When something breaks, it's big.
Mm-hmm. John? Oh, Rob, did you have to add?
If I may, by law, there's certain parts of them trucks that we cannot work on because we do not have the certifications. So when it's in that area, we have to have a certified mechanic or a certified fire truck mechanic work on them.
Thanks for that clarification.
Yeah, and those folks have been really good about coming here. They come on site and do the repairs, so the vehicle's only down for a brief period of time and it's back in service. And you see those notices. You just got a notice today that 77 was out of service for a period of time. Something was being changed, and it's back in service.
Okay, John.
If we're going to get on the November ballot, I think we have to move pretty quickly. We have to communicate to the citizens about it. I'll move for the placement of a fire department vehicle replacement proposal, 0.6 of a mil for 6 years, to be placed on that ballot.
Support.
Okay.
The only comment I'd say is that actually that agenda item is down further. This is more of an informational.
Well,
If you want to hold off
we can
until,
hold, yeah.
if you want to hold off to that,
We can.
Because I've got something else I want to throw at you too.
how about we do that?
Okay.
Sure.
Okay.
Just, that's tabling. That's actual.
That's actually a table. We're not going to table it though. But
Okay.
But, but actually, as you look through this report that I put at your tables, you'll see, I mean, that if you start adding up the repair costs over the last 5 years, you're 10-15% of the cost of a new vehicle. Two of the vehicles over the last 5 years, we spent about $60,000 in maintenance costs on the two primary vehicles. And that's basically, I don't want anybody to think that they're not in top-notch condition. They are in top-notch condition. It's just that when, well, you heard two simple repairs, a rear end, you replace a rear end on a car, it's $1,000. Here it was, $6,000. And the other was a $12,000 repair on a pump that had to be done right now. It's not something that you can, wrap in duct tape and say, well, we'll get by until we can afford it. I mean, those kinds of repairs need to be done. Yeah, so I think that's what we're trying to portray to the board members, because you don't deal with this stuff every day. Those are expensive pieces of equipment to keep maintained and ready to roll out the door when the siren goes off. And, it's been going off a lot recently. Luckily, we've not had any incidents with our vehicles like some other communities have had, where they've been involved in accidents by people not getting out of their way or pulling out in front of them. We haven't had any of those things yet, and we're very diligent about it. People ask me, so why did 2 trucks go to that car accident? Well, because one blocks traffic. We station one to block the traffic so that the firefighters can do the work they need to do without people driving by and running into them. That's why. So those are operational issues that, unless you deal with it all the time, you don't think about.
Okay, so we're good on this for just a bit? Move forward? Okay.
But certainly, any questions that board members have on this, we certainly provide you, more documentation or whatever.
Okay, stand by. Consider Semco easement purchase proposal on Wellfield property. This is what Roger was kind of referring to before. He's got a letter here in the packet. Oh, nope, that's not. This is the part. Oh, yeah, it is
I have an
Semco,
opinion.
sorry.
Yeah, we have Roger's letter.
Who wants to talk about that?
Well, in very brief, and just very brief, and then Roger can talk about the specific recommendation. But very briefly, Semco came to us. As you may recall, they are running a major gas line to service the 7 generators that are being placed in Marquette Township. Another 3 are being placed in a couple of other places to the west and to the north of Marquette Township, as well as the 3 that are here in Marquette, and to connect with the transmission line that's on Pioneer Avenue near Division 553 in the city of Marquette, as a backup in case the other line is damaged or fails in some manner. It's a reciprocal system and duplication. But they intended to run that right straight across our well field, and we had objection to that. Since we will be potentially expanding our well field south towards the ski hill. And we met with them on several different occasions, had some very good discussion back and forth, offered them 3 different options as opposed to the one that they were preferring. And basically how they did, in fairness, is they took a map and they drew a straight line on the map, basically, which is their easiest routing. I mean, it's just a straight line for them is the easiest way to do things. So they did ultimately agree to accept one of the alternate routes that we proposed, and essentially that route follows the current snowmobile trail that runs along the top of the ridge at the far south end of our property, just before it drops down to the Carp River by the ski hill. So that's what you have before you today, is the proposed easement agreement that puts that route into place only for their use, not for any other use specifically, and Roger can speak to that.
I believe my recommendation and correspondence dated June 6th was included in the packet.
Yes.
And I really don't have a lot to add besides that. We want to make sure that, because it is currently going on a trail that is used for something else, that it doesn't get expanded to to something over and above what is being proposed. That's sort of implicit in what's said. This would expressly state that, so there can be no confusion or ambiguity. In terms of whether there's some room for negotiation on the price, that's not a legal recommendation, that's a business item for the board to discuss. They may or they may not be receptive to that. There are a couple of different easements that you should have noticed there. There's the easement that will remain more or less in perpetuity for the gas line itself. But then there's also a construction easement that's a little bit wider, because in order to place the gas line, they obviously need to excavate, and to excavate, they'll need to remove some trees along the edges and so forth. That is a temporary easement that will be terminated when the construction is completed and the gas line is in place. There's also another temporary access easement that just allows them to get equipment in and out from a different direction. Same type of scenario, that will terminate or expire when the project is done. So really, the only thing that needs major attention is what are we giving up in terms of the easement? That's a perpetual easement where the gas line goes, and that's where I was recommending a minor addition of some language that I doubt that they would object to.
And all of the access that's being talked about is off of 553. It's not off of Grove Street. It comes off of M553 by the ski hill.
It's pretty much standard, though, isn't it? I mean, any project like this.
Well, to a degree, but you
degree,
still
yeah.
need to scrutinize it to see what the
I know,
long term
yeah.
is. Most of the access is off 553. They're coming in someplace because there's that temporary
Further-
access easement that's coming from the
Right.
other direction
Further
also.
to the east.
And that's what we were careful to clarify, that too is just a temporary access easement for getting some equipment in and out. And the final thing that's in there is there's a form in which the township needs to elect what do you want to have done with any wood that they cut down for trees that are, that have to be removed when the construction takes place. And that, again, is not so much a legal issue. You have a couple of different options. One of them is
Stumpage.
if there's some good-looking straight timber that we would elect to have it cut into commercial lengths, and we would retain possession of it. If it's all tag elder and garbage, then we would have them remove it. And the form is self-explanatory, but a decision will have to be made, and somebody's going to have to go out there before
Take a look.
the form is completed to see which makes the most sense to
I would
exercise.
suggest that we use the county forester to do that.
And we just have to pick one. We're not allowed to do a multiple if there's, say, an acre of good
Oh, yeah.
standing
No,
timber.
That's up to us.
It can intermix?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And remember, the scrutiny here, like Roger was saying, is because it's going across our well property, that's the biggest part of it. It'd be bad enough if it were recreation, but this is serious stuff. They wanted to cut right below our main area.
As a, for instance, one of the things that we want to be very cautious about is that it cannot be converted into a road, a public access road across our well field or something like that. So, we have as a municipality with a municipal water supply, we have a federal obligation to limit access to that property, to preserve and protect the wells.
So most of this paperwork was given to us at the meeting with the SEMCO representatives, and then Roger made his changes, so they have not seen these yet. This is gonna be our presentation to them. So we don't know that it would be accepted, or has been, or could be, but, so this is, just so you know where we are in the scheme of this.
What would an appropriate motion be? Would it be to,
An appropriate motion might be to approve the concept of the language with the recommended, of the easements with the recommended revision. And then you've got to have a discussion
and
as far as
authorize,
on the price and so forth.
authorize staff to investigate the remainder?
Sure.
Okay, Ernie?
When we have this easement on this property, is there going to be any effect on any future development in the area or road over it, or can we put a road over it for anything at all? I don't know what the future of the land will ever be used for, but I'm trying to think further down the line.
We could on our property, but we're restricting anybody else.
We own the land.
Yeah.
An easement just grants the right to a third party to co-use the land, in this case, in a 40-foot wide strip. Can they go in with a truck and clear brush every 5 years so it's passable? Because they have federal and state regulations that they have to comply with in making sure that the gas line meets protocol and criteria. Yes, they can do that, but they cannot then, part of the language that I'm suggesting be put in there, they cannot re-grant that to anybody else. That would increase the burden placed upon our land or the traffic over our land, essentially.
Can a road be put over that
We
by the
can.
township?
We can, yes.
We could put one.
Yeah, we own it. We own the property.
So if we wanted, for some unforeseen reason, to put in a 66-foot wide road, we could put a 66-foot wide road, in theory, over it at least, even though the easement is only 45 feet, because we own
Okay,
the whole acreage.
I just didn't
Now,
want.
whether it would make sense to put an improved road on top of a gas line that may have to be repaired and dug up periodically is a wholly separate question.
In a wheel field
But we
besides.
do have the right to do that, if for some reason we wanted to do that.
Just we wanted to
I have
prevent
no idea
anybody
what the
else.
future is gonna bring, but you don't have any idea, so just kind of ask
No,
some questions.
in essence, all this does is this grants them the ability to put their pipe in this location that we've recommended, which is also a snowmobile trail, but not to develop it further.
Andy?
I'll move to, how did you phrase that? Accept the proposed easements with, or, accept the proposed easements with the revisions from legal counsel and authorize staff to move forward in the progress and, of negotiations with the SEMCO and bring back the final solution to the board
I'll
at a
second
future
that.
meeting. Basically, that's it. I mean, it's because the staff has to move forward with it, and then they have to discuss things with the gas company and have an appropriate price and such, and then it'll come back to us for final approval.
Right, this is the first time you've seen it. So basically, what staff will need to do now is to evaluate the values that they've placed upon the easement, predicated upon our determination of what the value is for the property, and then what happens with the timber.
So will we, when you make that determination?
Comes
will
back
this
to you.
come Back to us?
It'll come back to you before it goes to them.
Okay.
Yes.
And at one point, do we sign it when it's an offer to them?
No, when they accept.
When they,
Oh, when
they
they
would
accept
sign it and send it back to us
Okay.
for final signature.
Did we have a second?
Yes.
Trustee LaRue.
Pete? Okay. Is this gonna involve roll call because of the easements and everything? Okay.
Clerk Rattari is yes. Trustee LaRue?
Yes.
Trustee Wiegand?
Yes.
Trustee Marks?
Yes.
Trustee Everson?
Yes.
Treasurer Johnson?
Yes,
Supervisor Durant?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Let's pass gas.
Okay, there's one motion. All right, next is consider proposed short-term rental text amendment, second reading. And that's what it says. We've already seen this once before. Let me get down there.
Right, and I told Planner McCarthy he did not need to be here because this is a second reading, and you, at the last time, you accepted the alterations from the Planning Commission.
I suppose Isaac or Mike Springer could answer something if anybody had any questions.
what's the
Randy.
proper motion on here?
I'll move to accept the proposed short-term rental text amendment, second reading.
Support.
Motion and support. Any questions, comments?
This will be a roll call vote.
Yep.
Clerk Rattari is yes. Treasurer Johnson?
Yes,
Trustee LaRue. Trustee
Yes.
LaRue.
Yes.
Trustee Wiegand.
Yes.
Trustee Everson.
Yes?
Trustee Marks.
No.
Supervisor Durant.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-1.
Attorney?
Just have a question now. When does this become, we have to advertise in the paper and there's a time frame?
It has to be published.
They don't have the effective date.
If I'm not mistaken. I think it's like 30 days after publication.
Some are unless we specify otherwise, and I seem to have left my copy on the desk, but I can
it's
circulate
30.
something tomorrow on that. It's either, it can be made immediate upon publication even, and we may possibly have done that.
This was immediate after publication.
Okay.
That's what I was seeming to recall.
All right. 8C is consider 2018 road maintenance project scope, road committee and planning commission recommendation. More proposals. Whoops. Let's see. I saw them working out on Forestville, the road commission. You want to read this one, Randy? Or not? Do we need to? Yes. Sorry. We're losing you two on the end of the table there.
No, I didn't see anything, okay, on the DDA, I don't think we need to read anything on the DDA, but basically the board accepted the
No,
language.
Road maintenance.
Road maintenance.
Road maintenance.
Jason's recommendations.
Oh. I really don't have any comment. We have, we've collected the taxes, the estimated cost falls within what was collected for the year.
Okay. Go ahead.
We've all seen the report.
It was the recommendation from the road committee and the planning commission that we award the contract to Farner with the removal of item number 16 and 12. That would be Moran Street and Forestville Roads for reasons that were discussed before. Unless somebody wants me to go over them again, but.
John? Oh, sorry. Did you say something?
I had a question on, in the motion, do we have to indicate the dollar amount? Because it is a bid in that?
Yeah, I will put that in there.
But is it, the dollar amount you have is 83,000, is that
Well, it's going to be minus
minus the
16.
1418 and the 41?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
Is there a motion?
I'm just trying to get clarified before we
Okay,
move forward.
sure.
in that, so.
Yes, Randy.
I don't have the dollar amount in front of me to
Lights, yeah.
come up with.
I'll make a motion to approve the
Support.
the 2018 road maintenance project scope for the recommendation from the road committee and planning commission, minus item 16 and minus 12, and I will have the correct dollar amount
Yep.
listed.
43,618.25.
The two deletions are in order.
Yes, so
4854. That's what I got. We should have had that number on here. We shouldn't have to
I've got it
figure it
right
out.
here.
I have
The
48.
adjusted bid price would be $40,854.84.
Good.
that's to Farner.
The Farner, yes.
Okay, motion and a second have been made for that.
Do we need a roll call because it's a contract? Or
No.
No.
Going with the recommendation? Okay. All in favor then?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Consider, now we're up to DDA, Randy. Adoption of
so I was
DDA ordinance amendment, second
Catching up on
reading.
Jason's. You do have the ordinance in front of you on the redesignation of the downtown district boundaries. It has not changed from the first reading. I recommend the adoption.
Move to adopt.
Second.
That was too easy. Questions? Comments?
Well, you put the ordinance number on it when you,
The ordinance
Yes.
number will be as
Date.
of the date, so it'll be 6/19/18 when it's approved.
Okay.
Basically, I think this one's a little different. It's you get published and then it'll take
This
some,
has to be published, yes.
and then it'll be like 30, was it 30 days?
Yes.
30 days after publication, it goes into effect. So that would actually be the date of the ordinance? Or is it the date the board adopted it?
Regardless,
Date adopted.
Adopted. You have to
So
adopt
it'd
it.
be 06/19/18 would be the.
Correct.
-1 and -2, or -A and -B, because this is your second ordinance.
Second
you've
ordinance.
adopted tonight.
yeah, dash, yeah. Well, the other one was just a text amendment, though.
Yeah, but it's still,
Still an ordinance change.
yeah.
-2.
There's 1 or 2, or, okay. Okay, we need a roll call on this too, don't we?
You do, trustee Marks,
Yes.
trustee LaRue,
Yes.
trustee Wiegand,
yes.
trustee Everson,
Yes?
treasurer Johnson,
Yes.
and clerk Rattari is yes, and supervisor Durant.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, I'm doing a lot of business tonight. Consider township millage questions, fire apparatus, here we come again. And law enforcement. I do have, we've already had this discussion a little bit tonight, but I do have something I want to clarify with Roger. I had asked him the question a couple weeks ago when we were looking at the library millage, and I'm not sure that I formed the question correctly to get the answer I was looking for. The more I thought of this today when I was going over it again. Our duty as a municipality is for the health, safety, and welfare of our public. Okay? The discussion we've had numerous times about the library, because of the huge amount of money that the taxpayers are contributing, $220,000+ this year. It's their tax money, but it's also tax money of people who don't use the library. I have nothing against the library. That's not the point of my comments and the point I'm trying to make. Our responsibility, in my mind, is not to provide library cards to the public. That's not our job. And the question I asked Roger a few weeks ago was, are we required to put this on the ballot? If you want to go buy a car, what does that have to do with the township? If you want to go and rent a book and have a library card, why are we as a taxing municipality expected or required to provide that? I don't understand the dynamics of that. And my whole point is, my question to him was, are we required, because we're asked to put a millage on for something that has nothing to do with us, required to do that? And if we are, why? And if we aren't, can we just have them take care of it themselves? If they want to go out and solicit memberships, that's what they should be doing. That's a library card's a luxury. It's not part of operating our organization. Does that make sense, Roger, or am I still wrong?
Well, you voted that it's going to be on.
I understand, yeah, we're locked in for
So
2
you
years.
can't back out now.
I understand that, no.
And you don't have the answer is essentially, you don't have a library in the township. So if you want to have library services, you must do it through a contract,
Okay.
which is what you
What we're
did.
doing, mhm.
So if you have a contract, your contract says that you will place it on the ballot for a 2-year period, a 1-year period, whatever your contract says. If you don't want to provide that service, then you terminate the contract or you don't enter into a contract. Once you have a contract, you must put it on the ballot, essentially.
So the contract is the caveat, which
Yes.
is what we're in now.
And you
which is
cannot
fine.
have a millage to get library services without a contract under state law.
Okay.
When you don't have your own library. If you're going to contract with some other entity who does have a library, that's the process for doing it.
Okay,
So if you don't want to provide library services for the residents of Marquette Township, then you terminate the contract.
and I'm not proposing that.
Okay.
I just want clarification because it didn't seem to, I didn't quite get it when we went through the process. And I'm not saying I wouldn't have voted the way I did, but we have serious, we're talking $1 million equipment here, whether it's to fund the fire department, period, whether to capitalize their equipment, whether to look at police services. We have millions of dollars that we are responsible to provide for these people. We're not responsible to provide library cards. That's the only point I'm trying to make. We're already done.
I agree.
We got the contract done, but it's part of this discussion with the Capitol. It's maybe not right now, because we've already committed ourselves for 2 more years, but this township's got to look at this in 2 years, and this comes up again. And I just want to emphasize the importance of this. The library's great. I love it. I have nothing against them. They work hard. They're evolving into a community center. They're doing great things. They're babysitting. They have movies. That's not it. But that's not our job. And that's just something that I felt I had to get clarified with whatever's going to happen, whoever's here in 2 years.
Thank you.
And Pete?
Also on the same lines is that we're talking about providing a service. We're providing police coverage, and then the penal codes, in which I know everyone's going to jump up and down over, but that should go to the township to help pay for some of the protection. I don't know how, I wanted to check on that, but
Can't do it.
you can't do it. Well, you can do it according to Mr.
No, it has-
Marks,
has to go back
there's
to the
steps.
library.
Right.
Has to go back.
Well,
If
Chalkley
you-
does it. How are they getting by with it?
They have
If
an
we will-
established police department.
Yeah, they do.
Because they have a police department, not because it's contracted.
Right.
If we wanted to put a little library building or something out here, we could use the funds for that, or they could. It's gotta be, that's the problem.
I just, when I look at that, it sort of burns, and we talked about it a while back too, but, the cost of our police protection is gonna go higher and higher because we need more protection. And where do we get the funds? And I just look at that and say, oh,
Well-
it's not that much, but it's the start.
But remember too, we've had so many discussions about recreation and trails and everything, and how we're gonna continue to fund that. We've stepped back from all of the grants and everything else that we were gonna do because we
can't-
don't have that
the chair
funding.
match.
But we have admitted that that's a frivolous thing. It's not part of what we have to offer. So if we're willing to do something like that we've made a commitment, if we're willing to go against what we've made a commitment for because we know we can't afford it, why would we? And this is something that everybody wants. I mean, even the tourists want. You're talking about a library card, a $75 library card that somebody can't go buy themselves. They can't go buy a park. They can't go buy a swing set. If our public wants us to do trails and recreation, and that's what they've repeatedly asked for, I don't know. It's just, sorry, my soapbox. Okay.
Just an amen to the
Okay.
conversation.
All right. So,
In everybody's box, as you came into the township tonight, there was information provided in answer to the question that was asked at our last meeting. Has it changed any? Has our Peter White Public Library changed since, say, 10 years ago? And I've given you a complete report on that. It's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to answer your question, but it will give people more information about what goes on and on and on.
And actually, I didn't really even cover the second part of that. The reason I started thinking about that is because the accumulated funding through a tax for a library card that really needs to go for the operations of this township and the health, safety, and welfare of the residents and the guests is that huge amount of money. That's the end result. Because the people who are paying for those library cards in their taxes are not the only people contributing to the library. So the disparity between we don't know how many library cards there are, 1,000 maybe, and what that money generates versus what everybody else has to pay that doesn't have a card is tax money. That's our revenue. That's all we get is tax money. So if we don't have access to that, if people say they want to go buy a library card, if you want to buy a card, go ahead. Why should I tax him? He wants trails. He wants police services. He wants fire services. It's a tax. We're not buying, and that's why I suggested 10 years ago, then if somebody wants a card, maybe we just buy them a card and not tax the whole township. Why would you have a tax for a library card? Okay, that's enough. That's enough.
I get a
I had to tie in the
rebuttal.
money. Yes, you
Does
can.
that bother you?
Yes, you can.
But the supervisor's correct, but the thing that she doesn't realize, if that millage gets voted down, that 223,000 doesn't come back to us.
Right. I know
It
it's
does
not
not
ours.
come back to us.
Yep.
No, it doesn't
No, I
come
know
back
that.
to us, but it is available.
By the public to do what they want.
public to
Majority of the
reallocate.
public to do.
And this is my opinion, okay? We just put it on the ballot for the voters, and they decide. If they don't like it, they vote no. If they want it, they vote yes. And Lynn is correct.
But the fallacy of that is that 2/3 of the folks that pay it don't vote.
Yeah, and don't have a
Business
card.
community.
They don't get a card either. The Walmart people don't get cards,
But they pay.
and Meijer, and the hotels, and the restaurants, and the gas stations.
However, that's a good problem we have versus other places that don't have that. And
Right.
So that's actually a good problem we have, that we have the businesses that can support that, where other places
It
don't.
doesn't help us.
It doesn't
That
help.
part doesn't.
Yeah, it doesn't help us, but I just see it, there is some probably inequity in the way it's funded, but hopefully we'll work through that in the next few years.
What agenda item we on?
I'm sorry. I don't do that very often.
Jen,
But when you're talking a couple $100,000 and we're got a tight budget,
Penny.
I had to do that. I had to explain it.
6E.
Okay. So we're back to the millage questions, and we do have a tabled motion. Do you remember what it was?
Well, it really didn't table it, because you have to vote on the table.
It was
We didn't
delayed.
vote on the
Okay.
table.
Deferred.
So John, it was just deferred, so
Okay,
trustee
deferred.
Marks would have to make that motion.
Do you remember your motion, John, on the fire millage?
Move for the placement
On the ballot, yes.
on the November ballot,
yeah, 6/10.
the fire department vehicle replacement proposal, 0.6 of a mil for a period of 6 years.
And I did second that.
Okay.
The only comment I will make is the appropriate motion would be to direct the clerk to draft
Okay,
the appropriate language, because that would have to come back to the board for final approval.
That's what I thought John said.
Just like the library, where you'll see the actual ballot language next meeting, that would be the same with this. You'd actually see a resolution and language.
that's right.
So I'll work with the attorney and get the appropriate language done.
One question I do have on that, to our manager is, do you believe 0.6 of a mil is enough, given the price of these apparatus and the years that they've been around? And I don't know if that's gonna be enough.
Do you remember what you said last time, half a mil generated?
0.6 of a mil will run about 135,000 a year.
Right.
And that-
Okay.
for 6
fire-
years.
well-
That's,
Times six.
yeah.
It's not quite,
Change it to half of mil if you
it does not apply on personal property, just on real property for the fire department. But that's a question, do I think it's enough? No, I don't think it's enough. Question is, what will the voters think?
Oh, public,
Is it enough? And basically what you're talking about is, there's going to be a lot of questions on the ballot. I'm suspecting there'll be a fair number of questions, but it's a start. And anything that we can start to build that would reduce our cost long-term saves us interest, saves us whatever the interest would be. And, what we had talked about was a millage for apparatus replacement or major repair is what we had talked about, building up that fund. So not for buying other equipment or, turnout gear or anything like that, but keeping our current apparatus viable and looking forward to the replacement.
Ernie?
When you talk about fire apparatus, I think we have to be more direct so that people know exactly what we're talking about at that point in time. And when you really look at doing that, looking at where our dollars are coming from the budget at this point in time, where is that money going and how we're going to use that? Because that question's going to come up.
I guess I don't follow what you mean.
We spent, $6,000 on
Yeah, that's.
that and 12,000 something else
That's
on
being
the current budget.
Right.
So if we're going to have a millage of some type for apparatus and maintaining it, these dollar amounts will not be coming out of the regular 2.5 at this
Oh, yeah,
point in time.
regular maintenance, so we're talking about critical type. We're not just talking about regular maintenance, we're talking about critical, like a major pump goes, or the frame breaks, or something along those lines that would put a piece of equipment out of service, to keep it in service.
I was going to ask you if we would have to do a number, a qualification number saying any maintenance item costing more than X number of dollars would fall to this
I
account?
don't think for that question you have to get into that kind of detail, but basically, we are still going to fund regular routine maintenance right out of the budget. I mean, that's not what this would be for. This is for replacement is what it's for, but the replacement may be caused by a failure.
We have to make sure we relay that directly to the residents. Otherwise, they're going to get confused as to what's going on here and that too.
Yeah, the repairs that we talked about are coming out of the current budget. So we've reallocated within the budget. There are some other things that aren't going to get done, and we'll continue to do that. The whole intent of this millage would be to build a fund, not to just have something that we keep funneling money off of.
Well, I see us having to do some of our road committee type education sessions and stuff at the fire hall, or wherever we can hold them, that wouldn't compromise the fire station here. Charts, reports, pictures, whatever, whatever we need to put together.
Just factual information.
Yep, so that the public come in and see what we're trying to accomplish.
I mean, it would be much cleaner if it were simply apparatus replacement, period.
Entire apparatus? Because you were saying
Replacement, yeah,
something was
replacement
down.
vehicle. We're building towards the next vehicle that we have to buy.
Does that make sense? Clear?
If that's what we want to present to the people. and that.
Well, I think it is, because that's what we're talking about. We're repairing what we currently have, but there is going to come a point in time, and it may be the aerial, the first one, if, the new incoming governor and the legislature coming in changes that requirement back to the 20 years, we may have to buy one right away. Otherwise, it's going to be a major failure that's going to put a piece of equipment unserviceable, unsalvageable, that we have to replace. And we may, if it's only a year or two from now, we're still going to have to do an installment purchase or bond. I would certainly not recommend bonding for something like that. That would be an installment purchase, much less costly than a bond. And you would use the millage that's already in place to continue to help pay for that.
Randy, how specific does the resolution have to be then?
Should say
Or the
replace.
motion?
Well,
I mean, the ballot language.
the ballot language has to be very specific, just like our road was, and
So we would
so
say
you're gonna have to be very
replace.
specific on what you place, because that's what you have to follow, and that's what me and Roger would
Okay.
work on.
So we don't
And-
have to do that as part of the motion right now?
No, it'll come back to you for approval of the final language.
He keeps putting his hand up. Go ahead, Dave.
2 questions. How much is 6/10 gonna bring in a year?
125,000.
Approximately.
135,000.
Yeah,
35.
approximately.
We don't seem to be very sure about that.
Well, it's gonna,
I'm going by 224,000 for 1 mil, and 6/10 of that is gonna come up about 135,000. I don't have the exact to the penny, but that's
that'll,
approximately what.
And the
that would be part of
motion-
the part of the language that would come back to you would have that figure in it.
The motion was replacement and
Replacement.
maintenance? Just replacement?
Replacement.
Okay,
Apparatus
all right,
replacement.
okay.
Apparatus replacement.
That can come in any way that
Yep.
you have to replace it.
Got it. Those are my questions, see? It's easy.
Okay. Anything else?
Oh, let's go. Roll call.
Okay, go ahead, Randy.
Trustee Marks,
Yes.
trustee Everson,
Yes?
trustee LaRue,
Yes.
trustee Wiegand,
Yes.
treasurer Johnson,
Yes.
secretary is yes, and supervisor Durant.
Yes.
Motion carries.
And of course, the public can say no, so then we're
Sure.
back to the drawing board. We can either change the amount or whatever we,
Still gonna need that truck then.
History shows that we've been very supportive. The fire departments have been always very supportive. The public, they support them. They need that service, and they're willing to pay for it.
Well, and again, the whole concept here is to avoid future interest payments. That's the whole point of this, is to reduce that, to have some money available to minimize that interest cost going forward. I'm absolutely certain that we are going to have to do an installment purchase one way or another. It's just a matter of what the amount would be.
Well, the apparatus that's going to be replaced is also going to be worth something, hopefully, if
Something.
it's not totally shot.
Something.
Yeah.
But
John?
But this whole issue on the ballot and being discussed and in the paper brings the public around to being knowledgeable about an issue that we have that's strategic. We have to do this.
Yeah, and recently Chocolate Township had to do the same thing. We had several other townships have had to go through this whole process, and they ended up either bonding or installment purchasing.
This is what the taxes are for.
Proactive.
Okay?
Okay.
Consider draft ordinance for property use.
About the law
Did
enforcement.
did you, what, did you
Oh, it was a
forget the law
two-part. I'm
enforcement?
sorry. Yep, I should have had her separated. Okay, then let me move this. Okay, John, go ahead.
I'll be glad to put something in order so that we can talk. I move for using the language of the clerk that is appropriate, but
Drafting language, just to direct
be
the clerk to
drafted, yeah.
draft the language.
that there be a sheriff's department police patrol supplement proposal, 4/10 of a mil for 6 years.
Support?
Comments, questions?
This is
Ernie?
something we've talked about for a long time, and we had a lot of public opinion at many meetings that expressed their concern for the sheriff's department extra protection, and I think this'll show us if they're willing to pay for it.
Ernie?
Okay, we are contributing, about 200,000 a year, somewhere right at that point in time. So this 4/10 will be additional to that for additional?
No,
That?
to replace that. It's currently funded out of the general fund tax revenues. And my intention when I brought this up through the budget process was to build back up our fund balance that we lost in the dark stores issue. We lost about $300,000. So right now, we have about 2 months of general fund operating revenue in reserve. The 2018 contract was about $194,000. And I expect it'll be slightly higher than that for 2019, although I've not done that calculation as yet. I know they had a 3% wage increase on the last contract. So, and their health insurance went up. So I'm guessing we're gonna be dancing right around that 200,000 mark for the supplemental contract for 2019. So that was my purpose for suggesting a millage to offset that would be to give the general fund back that money to build up to our 4 months, which the board has desired or targeted for a fund balance.
4/10 is only going to generate approximately $90,000
A year,
So-
correct.
So you're going to end up still contributing
funding.
110 to 115,000 from the general fund. So you'll pick up 90,000 back into the general
Back
fund.
into the
then.
fund balance, correct.
Dave?
I guess the question that comes is, if the millage doesn't pass, is that a referendum from the voters if they don't want the supplemental sheriff's coverage? It would seem to be.
I don't know that they understand right now that they're already paying for supplemental and
Oh,
coverage.
I think they do. I think they know that.
Yep.
And basically, I would take that message not necessarily as anti-law enforcement as I would pro-fire. Yeah, because I think that's what they'll be weighing is, how are they gonna spend their money with ballot questions in front of them for supplemental law enforcement, for fire, for library, for whatever else is out there. How are they gonna allocate their funds?
I have a couple of issues with this too, actually. I think first of all, we've got the sheriff supposedly coming to the next meeting to give
The
us.
second meeting in July, because
Oh, I
Lois,
thought it was the
well,
third. That's right.
Lois won't have
We moved it.
June
That's right.
closed out
So
until
that
the
she can
second
close
meeting.
the month. I mean, he's supposed to be giving us a presentation or an explanation or
Mhm.
something, and I think this is a little premature to start this without at least having the discussion with him, because we brought him here and had a discussion, and he made a deal and gave us a break, and he's gonna put some numbers together. So I'm not saying I don't agree with it, I'm just saying I think it should wait until at least after we talk to him. The second thing is, I don't like having the two of these on the ballot at the same time. I don't know if we can get around that, but it kind of scares me to have one pitted against the other.
You didn't have any,
I didn't interrupt you, John.
okay,
I know you're passionate too, but I just,
Go ahead.
I don't want to do this tonight. I mean, that's my opinion. We'll see what happens with the vote, but go ahead, Dave.
This flies in the face of your comment about the library, about the health, safety, and welfare, and is supplemental sheriff's coverage
It scares me.
required? And I would say that it's not. It's a choice that the residents get to make. If it doesn't go on the ballot, if we don't figure out what we want to do tonight, it likely is not going to make the ballot.
No, we have time for November.
Well,
Not much.
not much, because by the time you get it reviewed and drafted and back to the board, it's got to be done by early August,
So
so.
we're looking at either now or never.
So there's no point in having the sheriff come then?
I'm sure there is.
Well, no, what the sheriff was doing was telling us, giving us a report on what their cost-saving measures have been going forward for 2019.
This only covers 50% or less of their
Right.
costs.
Right.
so-
That's my other problem with it. So you don't think that that's a contributing factor to putting this on the ballot? Either one of those things?
I don't have any problem giving the residents a choice. Make a decision.
But it isn't a one-for-one choice either. You're talking about, what did he say, 90,000 versus 200? So it's
doesn't-
not solving the
It
problem.
doesn't have to be a choice. It could be both, or neither one could pass, or they both could pass. Or one could pass and the other one could fail. It
No, I'm
doesn't-
not talking about the fire side of it now. I just mean funding the police.
Well, I'll certainly give the board something to think about if it doesn't pass.
If it doesn't pass, then I guess the voters have spoken and we go back to possibly 60 hours of coverage.
Or none.
Or none.
Or none.
Or leave it the way it is.
Yeah, it'd be a board decision at that point.
So are you all kind of more thinking that this is just to ask the question of how we want to fund the police department, the sheriff?
No, I'm thinking that every time this has come up, and we've certainly discussed it at the start of this year, the end of last year about the contract. And every time it comes up, we have a large contingent of those who support the sheriff's department's supplemental coverage. And it's always that the last time it became an issue of, was the sheriff's department doing their job? And that was never the reason for the whole issue. It was a matter of, can we afford it? But it got down to, at the time you got through with a couple meetings, it got down to, is the sheriff's department doing their job, and are we going to continue the contract, or are we going to suggest that they're not doing their job and not continue the contract? Well, that was never the issue. But you always get the group that will show up that are in support of it. If it's on the ballot, you have, the residents have an opportunity to voice their support or not voice their support.
But wouldn't you want to make it apples to apples and say, do the whole 200,000?
No. I think it gets the point across. Either they want to, if they're willing to fund this much of it, it tells us that they're serious about it.
But we're telling them what the number is. Maybe they're willing to fund a mill. I mean, that doesn't give you.
Well, you're gonna
Answer.
have that question answered when the surveys come back. That's one of the questions on the surveys.
Then the people that I've talked to have come up and told me that they're all in favor of additional hours for the sheriff's department,
Okay.
all right? Fire department stands by itself. People know they need that. But they're also in support of the fire department and also in support of the extra hours that we put on.
Right, but what we're talking about is the funding for the police department, how it's funded. And you're taking $90,000, comparing to 200, turning it into a tax, and taking some funds out of the general fund and diminishing the amount of coverage we have. And I don't understand the dynamics of that.
I guess that's not what I was suggesting when I made the suggestion. What I was suggesting is we need to retain additional money in the general fund to get to the 4-month funding plateau. And anything that came from another source other than general fund for supplemental law enforcement or any of the other recreation or anything else that we had that was funded out of the general fund would help accomplish that.
So this isn't a replacement, you're talking about a supplement.
No,
You're talking about leaving the 80-hour or 60-hour contract and getting some of the funding for the 200,000 through millage.
Correct. That was my
Okay, that
recommendation. It
makes-
wasn't putting the question out as to whether or not the sheriff's department or the sheriff's supplemental contract should remain or not remain.
Okay,
It was, how do we reduce the general fund cost to provide the service?
okay, I beg your pardon. Okay, I did.
And transfer some of that money back to the fund balance in the general fund to get back closer to that 4-month target that the board had established as the I hate to call it a reserve fund because it's not really a reserve fund. It's basically, it's a fund in case there's some kind of a disruption from our major source of funding, which is revenue sharing, which every year they talk about shutting the government down or cutting back on revenue sharing or whatever. And since we have a smaller property tax base now, and it sounds like it's going to be even smaller here pretty soon, particularly if they pass 1031, the utility personal property tax will go away. That's a big number.
Okay, that's what I was saying, this is
Yeah.
not, so we would still keep,
Yeah, this is not, from my standpoint, this is not a vote of confidence or no confidence in the sheriff's department. It's how do
Yeah,
we
right.
continue to fund the current level of operation, presuming the sheriff is going to come and convince you to do that, later in July, but reduce the cost to the general fund so we can build that fund back up and have that reserve should there be a disruption in our primary funding being revenue sharing. Whether it's a reduction in sales tax revenue or whether it's new administration coming in with a different view on townships and funding of townships, or whether the treasurer decides that township operations needs to be tuned up, like assessing needs to be tuned up, and any number of things could occur. That's why the board decided you needed that 4-month cushion in the general fund.
That's why it didn't make sense to do all this before talking to the sheriff, but now I see what you're talking about. No wonder you guys were all looking at me like I was.
I think we beat this up enough.
No, I don't know that there was clarity in what, because we talked about all kinds of different options, but from my standpoint, as the budget, it was just how do we reduce that roughly $200,000 figure that comes out of the general fund tax revenues and put some money back into the fund balance.
Do we need to actually earmark that then, the 90? Or does it just go into the balance? Or
Oh, no,
whatever
that
we
would, I would remove that, if there's a millage question out there and it's approved by the voters, whatever that generated in dollars for law enforcement, I would reduce the general fund's contribution by that same amount and put it into the fund balance.
Okay.
That fund balance is a segregated fund. It's not like a slush fund or anything else that we draw out of. It's an emergency fund.
Can I call a question on this? We've beat it up enough.
Well, I understand it now. I was going to vote against it. Thank you for the time, Dan. Go ahead.
Trustee Marks.
Yes.
Trustee Everson.
Yes.
Trustee Wiegand.
Yes.
Trustee LaRue.
Yes.
Treasurer Johnson.
Yes.
Clerk Rattari is yes, and Supervisor Durant.
Yes.
Motion carries. Looks like I'll have 2 millage questions, resolutions and ballot language to get back to you folks by probably the last meeting in July.
Thank you.
As a board, seeing we're moving in this direction, somehow relay this to the residents.
Oh, yeah.
Where we're going.
Sure.
How we're going to do it, why we're doing it, and what our outcome is going to be, that too, somehow or other.
They listen to this discussion because I'm sure people will think the way I did, and it's been clarified.
I would suspect that what we would do is the very same thing that the road committee did when the millage question was coming up, and we would have the fire department and the sheriff's department participate in joint discussion at several meetings, specifically for the purpose of informing the residents.
And at that time, we'll have actually the ballot language, and you can have factual meetings on it.
Okay, good plan. Thank you, gentlemen. Consider draft ordinance for property use.
This is coming to you from my standpoint as what I would reference as an emergency request, which would mean that the ordinance upon adoption would be in effect upon publication. And the reason I'm bringing it to you is that we've had an increasing incidence of conflict, particularly at Schwemmwood Park and at some of our other locations, township-owned properties around the township, that involve camping, basically. I'll call it camping. And the issue is that some of the campers have violent backgrounds, in fact have felony warrants in other states out for them, and it is diminishing the attraction of the amenities that we're trying to provide for our residents and visitors. So I have asked Roger to try and put together a draft ordinance for you to consider, which would restrict township-owned properties from overnight camping, overnight parking, and uses that are outside of what our intended uses are for our township facilities that we've funded and constructed for day use activities. That's what's before you this evening.
Dave?
Does this require 2 readings?
It can be adopted on the first reading as an emergency action, and I'm suggesting that it is an emergency action because we need to mitigate current conflicts that are occurring on a daily basis.
John?
If nothing, added to the urgency, I think, is when people start camping on private property, there's a health risk involved as well. So with that, I move for the adoption of the prepared ordinance.
Support.
Questions, Dave?
Am I correct in assuming that this only addresses township-owned property?
Correct. That's all that we have authority over.
Anything else?
I will put the motion that
But
it. do-
Roger has.
Oh, sorry,
interrupt.
Roger.
That was an excellent question, because there have been, in terms of, does it apply only to township-owned property? That is clearly the intent, because there have been, in some circumstances, in other jurisdictions, other states, efforts to enact complete prohibitions of camping in any public place. And that is something very different than what's being proposed here. For example, in rights-of-way, where you've got 200-foot wide rights-of-way for highways, but the road itself only takes 65 feet. That is not what this is addressing. That poses all kinds of other constitutional issues and so forth that would not be presented in something like this, because it's only addressing property owned or titled to Marquette Township. And one other thing I might interject, just for your discussion purposes, you'll notice that the proposed language has a couple of things that you need to decide before you just adopt this. The first one is, it's unlawful to camp on the property, according to the ordinance, on any township property, but then it's also indicating that it's unlawful for any person except for law enforcement officers or other persons on official township business to be within the confines of any park, recreational facility, or property owned or maintained by Marquette Township. You need to pick a time on something like that. This is designed to be, for example, your wellfield property, or the township hall property. If somebody not only comes to pitch a tent, but is out on the premises, is it going to be after a certain time? Is it going to be at 30 minutes past dusk, or before sunrise, or something completely different? You need to specify the parameters so your law enforcement agency can know how to issue the citation, is the first thing. So that's up for discussion. The final thing is then you need to pick the amount of the fine. It cannot be more than $100 per incident. The real objective here is not to collect money, but to end the undesirable conduct. So I put a relatively low fine in. Some of the people that you would be penalizing or fining, for a better term, may not be in a position to pay a $500 fine anyway. The real objective here is to just get them to move on. And if that can be accomplished with just a warning, so be it. But you need to have something to make this enforceable in terms of a penalty.
Time frame should probably be tracking with our noise ordinance. 10 PM, 7 AM,
End of 7, yeah.
and a $100 fine
Would this be effective?
on publication.
The maker of the motion accepts the amendment.
So moved.
Anything else?
I'll just fill, because this will actually go in the minutes, so I will fill those in the minutes.
I have a question. This is kind of going way out. What if some organization, be what it is, wants to set up a camping something for one night on, say, Lions Field area?
They can request it and we can approve it.
Okay, answered.
That, I guess, I haven't specifically addressed that, but that would be similar to you having a policy of no alcohol.
Okay.
And where you've lifted that for a specific event in some extremely limited circumstances, maybe not real recently, but in years gone by. Same type of an exception could be made for something like that.
Particularly if it benefited the township in some manner.
I didn't end up having this in my packet. It's not online either, so I don't know if it got missed, or does everybody have it in their packets?
Yeah, I have it.
Okay. I went online and looked, and it's not on there either.
Page 1.
Item 8F.
8F, it was online. I downloaded it.
Look in your packet ahead of 8D.
Ahead of it?
It's page 118.
Yeah, I think in some of the packets, it was reversed.
trees.
D and F or D and E were reversed.
I just want to make sure the public knows what we've got. There it is, okay. Yeah, it's just out of order, thank you. Because I knew I read it, but I didn't read it in here. Okay, so it's out of order.
That's in there, should be in there.
Okay, so we need another, yes, sir?
I'm just, I call a question again.
I just want to make sure the public knows what we're doing.
No, signature by the supervisor and the clerk is automatic on this?
Yes.
Ordinance.
Trustee Marks.
Yes.
Trustee Everson.
Yes?
Trustee LaRue.
Yes.
Trustee Wiegand.
Yes.
Treasurer Johnson.
Yes.
Clerk retires, yes, and Supervisor Durant.
Yes.
Motion carries. That'll be the third ordinance of the day. Correct, Roger? That'll be -3.
Okay, we did not have any pulled items from the consent agenda. Committee updates?
Oh, certainly.
We'll do it fast. Dan's ready to go.
Before he calls my question. The Planning Commission, items that were considered from the June 13th meeting was to schedule a public, a special use permit public hearing for the June 27th meeting. And the hearing concerns the installation of a residential solar energy system. And the applicant, if anybody wants to know that, it's up on Morgan Meadow Road. And the other one was the road rehab maintenance bid award, which you've already dealt with. The Recreation Committee, which was just prior to this meeting tonight. The Lions Field update is the pathway is being finished up. It was this afternoon when I came by there. They are compacting the path, and they're doing this restoration along the side of the path. And there's one change that was made from that. It kind of made it on the fly on last Friday. There was 2 picnic tables that were, and a barbecue pit that were supposed to be located behind the dugout on the first baseline. And it was part of the drawing. And when we got over there and got looking at it, it took a whole bunch of that green space out that was there by the pavilion. And so what we did was we took a path, a connector path, if you would, that goes from the walking trail, that goes around that side of the ball field, and it goes up to the pavilion concrete. And along that connecting path, they're going to put the barbecue pit that was supposed to be out there. And they're going to put the 2 picnic tables that are ADA compliant underneath the roof of the pavilion and save some of the green space. They are, or they were tonight, excavating the additional earth out where the swing set is going. We have some volunteers that are going out tomorrow to put the stakes in for the footings. It just needs to be determined on. And the manager's going to follow up with this. I spoke to him earlier on where or what level of involvement the roadie wants to have in this, finishing this up, or where they want to be included in it. And he'll get back with me on that tomorrow, I'm sure. And Schwimwood Park update, there's some slope restoration that was left over from last year that was being completed this week. And the signage that need to be updated over there will be done by mid-July. The road committee is, we discussed all the updates from our last, at our last board meeting, so unless somebody's got some questions based on the minutes, that would be it. Oh, there was one other thing that was being discussed at the Recreation Committee, and I'll throw it out there for your consideration, and you may want to talk about it at another meeting. Is it was brought up that we don't do a very good job in showing appreciation to volunteers. And especially when you look at the recent event, the car show, and we had a number of people, Applebee's, Big B Coffee, I don't know who all got involved in that to donate things. But we never, as a township, we never expressed appreciation for that. And it was a consensus of the rec committee, which means absolutely nothing because we were just talking about it openly, that we need to have a better way of expressing that appreciation for those volunteers. And it was a thought that that letter needs to come from the township in general, needs to be signed by the supervisor, and it needs to be signed, followed up with a signature by whatever committee was involved in it, the chairman. So in the case of the event committee, the supervisor would sign it, and Todd Nordyke would sign it as the event committee chairman to thank them for participating, because they put a lot of time and money into that and donate a lot of their time and a lot of their services. But we don't we thank them as a committee, but
The recognition you're looking
that's
for.
really not enough, and a certificate is really not the issue. It's just a letter of thanks that goes out from the township with a supervisor's signature on it and the committee that was involved with a signature on it, just to recognize their efforts and thank them for their stuff.
So you're thinking the major part, because Mike has really always been good about the individual thank yous and sending out letters.
I'm talking about the individual thank yous.
Both of them? Yeah, that's fine.
I'm talking about the number of people who have donated or committed funds to the underpass. They should get a thank you from the township with the township supervisor's signature on it that says thank you for your support.
Well, you've been talking about that at your meetings.
Well, and we have the letters,
Okay.
but they always go out from the rec committee.
Oh, I see.
Okay, but they shouldn't go out from the rec committee, they should go out from
Yeah.
Charter Township of Marquette.
Don't you think this
I
manager?
assumed they would come from the township.
Well, we do the same thing with the community events committee. In fact, we just signed the thank you cards today.
And
with the committee and-
that was the comment, is instead of going out from simply the committees, that they would go out from the township board
Sure.
with, and if you want to have a committee chairman's signature on there that they were involved with, great, but essentially they should go out from the township board.
Are you thinking like a policy, or is this just a recommendation to kind of start
Practice.
it? Or?
I'm
Up for discussion.
I'm thinking I'm just suggesting it'd be up for discussion, and we just
be a
establish
practice.
that's the way we're going to do it.
Okay. Is this a discussion, or do you want me to put it on agenda?
I don't care, you can do whatever you want with it.
I
What's
don't know that
thought?
it needs to
Good
be an
idea.
agenda item. It's basically
just
just a
do it?
protocol type thing.
Everybody likes recognition, you know?
And getting it in the mail is a thank you that is appreciated.
Mhm.
So, and signed by the supervisor,
Okay.
it has some authority.
Okay. We'll work it out.
Good idea.
Yep.
But that's the end of my updates.
Good, thank you.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Dave.
You're
Yes,
welcome.
Ernie.
One question, Dave, on the picnic tables,
Uh-huh.
are they going to be attached somehow or other so they don't walk away? Or are they too heavy?
I believe they are. Because they're quite expensive. Because they're all ADA compliant, and they have to have all the clear area around them and all that, so they can't be allowed to be moved around.
I've just seen too many of them in different places, all of a sudden they're there, and the next day they're gone or something like that too, so.
Okay. Any update on the survey? Have you gotten some back, or how are we
We
doing?
did get an update from the planning department, and they said they have gotten a surprising number of them back already.
The last time I talked to Isaac, he said he had a little over 100.
Yeah.
That was a few days ago.
Which is pretty good numbers for as long as they've been out. They've been out less than a week, about a week.
Great.
We're doing well.
Well done. Okay. No committee appointments. I'm still working on that list. You'll be getting something on that soon. What do you think about? I did talk to Susan Radwan about our discussions with compliance and monitoring and ends. These can all be scheduled in work sessions, and I know you guys like them. I prefer that. And not taking up a lot of board discussion, and then bringing the discussion back and having it in the minutes as to what we talked about. would you be willing to, especially since we're running late, take these two items, because there's some processes and policies that we need to discuss implementing. Just do a work session in the next couple weeks? Can we set that now, since we're all together? Couple hours, probably I'd say an hour for each one.
Well, we did have one, we did have a work session 5 to 7. We only had one person can't come, so I think we can have it pretty much during the day. It doesn't really matter to me.
Whatever works, yeah, I just wanted to suggest that, because they had asked. What's your schedule like next week?
Pick a day.
How's yours, Randy, work-wise?
I'm off actually till Wednesday, so Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday would have to be after 3. Monday or Tuesday, it can be any time.
Thursday won't work for me.
My problem in the next 2 weeks is I got all kinds of grandkids and everything else coming, so. You can set the meetings. If I show up, that means I'm running away from the grandkids for a while, that too, so.
Monday or Tuesday work for me
Yeah, Monday or Tuesday would be good
It's fine with
in the
me.
day.
How's Monday, Tuesday, when do the kids come? Saturday?
Friday.
This week?
It's coming Friday for the next 2 weeks.
You don't want to try to do anything this week, do you, or do you?
No.
Okay.
6:27.
You'll actually be looking for a break. It's good to do it Monday or
After
Tuesday.
tonight, okay.
Let's shoot for Tuesday.
Tuesday,
2 to 4.
2 to 4 Tuesday,
Or
the
2:30 to
26th.
26, 2 to 4.
2:30.
2:30 to
Oh,
2:30 to
now.
4. We should be, knock it out by then.
2:30 to what?
To 4.
4. Okay.
So it'll be policies 2.5 and 3.5.
So I'll move to schedule a work session for policy governance, Tuesday, what day is that? That's the
26th.
26th, 2:30 to 4, at the Township Hall.
And then I'll follow up with putting it on the July 3rd agenda, because we'll have to, so 7.3 is
So
going
we'll
to,
be covering 2.5 and 3.5?
yes, 2.5 and 3.5. Policy governance.
Keep that agenda on the 3rd short.
Okay. I don't have anything yet, so this is it. Because all we have to do is say what we talked about. We don't, we'll have already discussed it, okay? It just needs to be in the minutes, she said. Okay, so we're gonna hold 9D, 9E, and we can go to public comment.
Oh,
We have to
we have a
vote.
motion to schedule that work session that
Oh, yes,
needs to be
yes, sorry.
voted on. And
Do we
it's,
have a second?
yeah, we did. So
All
it
in
is,
favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
I just go on record, I'll try and make it. All depends on what's happening.
Hey, I think we're all at that point, you know, you never know what's gonna come up in our schedules. Now, public comment? Do we have any public comment? You're tired, you wanna go home? Don't blame you. Announcements? Nothing? Randy?
I'm going to be having an election meeting next, it'd be Tuesday, July 3rd at 6:15. They don't usually last very long, but that's where we approve the election inspectors, and that's about it for the election in August. And I don't have a public accuracy time yet, but we'll be having that where we test the voting machines. It'll be late July, before the August election, and they're all open to the public. They're welcome to come and see how we do that.
What are the times?
The election meeting, the election the election commission meeting will be before the next board meeting at 6:15, July 3rd. And just so the residents know, there is a board meeting on July 3rd, so we hopefully will keep it short.
Any other announcements? Managers report?
You do have a written report, and I'm not going to talk too much about the written report. It's getting kind of late. On the fire siren issue that we talked about earlier, I'll work with the fire department to see what kind of options we might be able to come up with to report back to you at your next meeting. We did have the car show and cruise Saturday. It was well attended. We had, even though the weather was questionable, we still had 75 cars show up. Good public participation. We had a lot of people, and the rain did hold off. It went around us, so we didn't really get rained on at all. Applebee's stepped up and really provided a lot of assistance to us. We had a whole list of vendors, Mama Russo's and Smokehouse Glenn's, Super One. There's just all kinds of people stepped up. This is really becoming a fairly large event. The next event is August 4th, Saturday, and that's the Community Day at Lions Field. Kicking off at 10 o'clock in the morning, and we're going to have the same type of a structure that we had last year. We've got the softball tournaments going on. We have the inflatables coming back again. The park will be newly renovated. The new swing set will be in place. The pathways will be in place. Grills and picnic tables will be in place. We have quite a lineup of music scheduled. You got jazz, you got a community sing, we got a variety of bands. So we'll be running music, I believe, from 2 o'clock in the afternoon till 10 o'clock at night. So there'll be a whole bunch of activities going on. Super One will be providing the food, running the grill this year. So look forward to it. Put it on your calendar. Saturday, August 4th, starting at 10 o'clock and running till 10 o'clock at night. Good time to be had by all.
Any questions for the manager? No?
I have one question. I've seen and I don't know what we can do about this, but I've seen an increase of people along roadways and parking lots and begging for different foods and anything will help, and that doesn't give us a good image either. Is there something we can do about that?
We are not alone. It is an issue for most of the community, well, certainly for the city of Marquette and for us in particular, because we have so much activity going on. We have been looking at that. The issue is that the individuals are either in the public right-of-way, as Roger mentioned earlier. We can't restrict what goes on in the public right-of-way, or they're on private property. And we have been having conversation with some of the property owners. It's becoming an issue.
Are any of those the same individuals that are possibly camping?
Some.
So maybe if we solve one issue, it'll solve two.
Might.
Hopefully.
Might. And it's unfortunate that we find ourselves in this situation, but we're not alone. Some of the folks that we've been talking with in the interview process that we're currently in have indicated that the areas that they're responsible for and in are experiencing the same. There's just a societal issue that their issues are not being addressed and not being taken care of, and they're just kind of adrift. And it's unfortunate that we can't do better.
I had one other question was, are we moving along with the fire chief's position? How's that going?
My notes, yeah.
You want to go with that?
Yeah, well, we can share. We've done 2 Skypes, 2 phone calls, I think. You've done a couple.
Yeah, we've talked with 6 of our external candidates. We wanted to get those out of the way before we talked with our internal candidates, and we just did the last of those. We did 3 yesterday afternoon, the last 3. So, yeah, it's moving forward, and we anticipate being at a point of making a decision within the next 2 weeks.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Recommendation. Anything else?
Got a question.
Yep.
For the 4th of July coming up, and the water bill, will that be going out before the 4th of July?
Yes.
Say something about the ordinance and the fireworks and stuff like that?
So the state is looking at fireworks in terms of a little further restriction. I don't believe they're going to get anything passed before the 4th of July. So, it's basically 36 hours before, 36 hours after. So you can start hearing fireworks probably on Monday, and it'll go until probably Thursday. But, you know, being a one-day holiday, it's not tied around a weekend, and I think it'll be not as celebrated, shall we say. It's hard to say.
The only other thing I'll do instead of public comment is, do you think that the township or the boards, members, or send a card to Senator Casperson? You know, I think that would be good, because when I was trying to set up some of these meetings with the township officials, he was one of the first ones to step up and say, I'll be there.
Yeah.
So I think he deserves, you know, a little card saying prayers or something like that.
Why don't I get a card and we can all sign it? It's a little more personal that way than just saying Marquette Township.
Right. I think that would be a nice gesture on our part.
Tom he's been a friend of the township for
Yes,
quite a while,
yeah.
and might even be worthy of a resolution.
He was up at the Houghton with the governor. And
Yep.
He's not going to stop, so.
No, you know, he won't.
Is that it, Pete?
That's it.
Okay. Dave?
With respect to the recommendation for the fire chief and the interview process and all that, when the board receives a recommendation, are we simply going to just receive the recommendation, or are we going to see who the also-rans were and where they fell in the qualification?
We figured the best way to present it would be not to necessarily have names, but give you the rationale for the recommendation. A rather thorough one, I think.
Yeah, and I guess the reason I bring it up is because personally, if I'm being asked to approve somebody, I'd like to know why I'm approving him versus somebody else.
Yeah, we did have a fair amount of discussion, have had a fair amount of discussion along that lines, and I think the last discussion we had yesterday afternoon, as a matter of fact, was to put together a summary of qualifications for each candidate, not necessarily naming, although they haven't requested confidentiality. I think it's reasonable to break out candidate 1, candidate 2, candidate 3, give you a breakout of what their background, their qualifications were, and then the rationale for a supervisor's decision.
And you gotta remember, it's just not the matrix of their experience, you know, how many certificates they have. It's a combination of a lot of different things. So that's what we hope to qualify for you.
Yeah, and you know, and what we're really focusing on here is, you know, we're a township in transition. You know, we're growing, we're still growing, and you know, you have the issue of the next 3 to 5 years. What's this township going to look like, and what is the demand on the fire department going to look like, and how might these the candidates from A through Z be a catalyst for making some of those decisions? At what point do we add a second shift? At what point do we become a staff department? At what point do we not have a siren anymore? And you know, there's a lot of things over the next 3 to 5 years, I think, that are going to be on the table that will need some. The board will need some leadership and some input from the fire department, not just the chief, but from the entire department, in formulating how we best meet our obligations for health, safety, and welfare of the residents and visitors going forward. We're lucky in that regard that we have to worry about that. There's a lot of places that don't, because they're stagnant and nothing's happening. So we are going to continue to grow. We are going to continue to evolve, and that's why I think it's so critical that we address things like how are we going to be replacing equipment, and how are we going to be able to fund that with diminishing taxes and people not wanting to pay more, and you know, the same mantra that's been going on for quite some time. Even if the dark store issue goes away, it's not going to change our situation. Those are done. We're not going to see that tax revenue come back.
Anything else? Motions. We got about 10 minutes just to read motions. Not so
Try to be
much.
quick. Consent agenda was approved. The regular agenda was approved with the addition of the voters, not politicians, in the privilege comment. Policy, we had third motion of the evening was to the Semco easement, and that was approved. Short-term rentals was the fourth motion, that was approved, second reading. Fifth motion was the road committee planning recommendation, and that was approved. Sixth motion was the DDA ordinance in second reading, that was approved. Seventh motion was to put 6/10 of a mil for 6 years in the draft ballot language for fire. Eighth motion was to direct the clerk to draft ballot language for police, 4/10 of a mil for 6 years. Ninth motion was to have the emergency ordinance of restricting camping, basically, in the township property. That was approved. 10th motion was to schedule a work session on Tuesday, 6/26/18, 2:30 to 4, and that'll be policy governance. That's it.
Awesome. Right now, the only thing I have is the policy governance wrap-up after the work session. Any other board member comment? No? One more motion.
So moved?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 9:30, 3 hours exactly. Thank you.